I have a sweet at the end of the world. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 851 Moon Landing Plan. Jiang Chen's expectations were not disappointed. The Graphene Research Institute of Future Heavy Industry came up with a solution and turned the floating plantation he envisioned into reality. 100 floating fields covering an area of 100 acres floated in the southwestern waters of Penglai City. They were connected to each other by graphene cables that fell into the sea. Under mutual traction, each floating field was as stable as flat ground and could not feel the ups and downs of the tide at all. All the sap produced was collected by the employees on the floating fields and poured into the designated area. Through the interconnected graphene pipelines, the sap was transported to the oil storage tanks, waiting for the tanker to transport it to the refinery on Mindanao Island, where it was processed into fuel and other chemical raw materials that could be produced by oil. Yes, although he did not plan to build the plantation abroad, Jiang Chen did not mind sharing the highly polluting industry of the refinery with his allies. Moro's industrial foundation was very weak, and half of its finances depended on the mining areas developed by Future Mining. Santos was eager for Jiang Chen to build all these highly polluting factories on his side. On the one hand, it can solve employment problems, and on the other hand, it can also increase tax revenue. No matter whether it is dirty or not, fill your stomach first. In this way, a relatively complete oil industry chain has been formed from Penglai City to Mindanao Island. The oil products produced in Mindanao Island will be transported to Angkor Island and the Singapore-Malaysia Special Zone through the port of Davao to support the oil needs of local chemical, food, clothing and other enterprises, and the excess oil will be exported to China. At present, both the refinery in Mindanao Island and the hundreds of acres of offshore plantations planned in Penglai City are under construction. According to the assessment of the Ministry of Finance, once this oil industry chain is completed, it will bring at least 20 billion Singapore dollars in direct profits to the Future Group every year, and completely reverse the current situation of Singapore's industry being subject to the international crude oil market. After hearing that the Future Group has found a new way to solve the energy crisis, various countries have sent their own researchers to Koro Island. In name, it is to exchange experiences, but in fact, they are trying every means to get the DNA code of this oil palm from the Future Group, and it would be best if they could also get the breeding technology. Overtly or covertly, all countries have tried their best. However, these researchers sent to new country, let alone exchanging experiences with the researchers of Future Group, have not even seen them. No matter what reasons they bring up, such as Academics Without Borders, or For All Mankind, the starring trade soldiers guarding the door of Future Building are completely unmoved. As for the spies who came secretly, they were all countered by the ghost agents without exception. Those with minor offenses were expelled from the country, and those with serious offenses were directly dealt with secretly. Although overseas activities are not as good as those old foxes of CIA and Mossad, the home advantage brought by high technology in conducting counter-espionage activities within the country has protected the national security of the entire new country like an iron barrel. Although they have tried their best, but still cannot get any benefits, countries have obviously not given up. Among them, Switzerland directly offered a price of $2 billion to purchase the DNA code, but Jiang Chen threw the letter of intent into the trash without even looking at it. Not to mention that this price is seriously underestimated. Just because of your NATO identity, it is impossible to sell it to you. Mobil Oil is a private company, and the price it offered was relatively high, reaching $3.7 billion. However, even with this figure, it was still far lower than Jiang Chen's own valuation of this technology. Even the Liu family in China was interested in this thing and asked Jiang Chen indirectly whether he had any plans to cooperate. If you are short of land, we just happen to have land here, Liu Xiangguo said with a smile on the phone. Okay, we can export crude oil to you at a price relatively lower than OPEC. As for the technology related to oil palm, don't even think about it. I can't sell it to you. Jiang Chen directly exposed his little thoughts and said, It's because you just happen to have land that I can't sell it to you. The only advantage of Future Group is technology. If this technology is sold, any slightly larger inland country can easily take out tens of millions of acres to grow this oil crop based on its own land area. One is on the sea and the other is on land. Without the technological advantage, there is no competition. Jiang Chen is not short of money to sell technology. No mercy at all? Prime Minister Liu pretended to be confused. Jiang Chen laughed. When doing business, what's the point of being merciful? Prime Minister Liu clicked his tongue and shook his head, thinking it was a pity. After dealing with Future Group for so long, he has almost understood Jiang Chen. He knew very well that Jiang Chen's words were so absolute, which meant that he didn't intend to give him any hope. Talking about this issue further would not have any results, but would instead make the relationship between the two families strained. Let's not talk about this anymore. Are you doing something new in outer space recently? That space colonization plan, are you serious? Although it was a casual chat, Jiang Chen could feel the temptation in the old man Liu's words. However, he didn't intend to hide this matter and said it bluntly. Yes, I even thought of the name of the first city. Oh. Haha, this is not a secret. Liu Xianguo smiled kindly and said in an elder's tone, show it off. Guanghan City. Jiang Chen also said with a smile. Guanghan City is named after the Guanghan Palace in the myth. As the name suggests, the first link of the starring trade space colonization plan is the moon. The construction of Guanghan City can be carried out simultaneously with the space elevator. After the space elevator is built and the transportation cost is reduced, the scale of the lunar city can be expanded. There is no need to wait step by step until the space elevator is completed before starting. Colonizing the moon has a strong practical significance. In addition to the rich titanium, manganese, chromium metal and rare earth resources, the most important thing is the helium-3 on the moon. With the rich reserves of helium-3 on the moon, Future Group will rely on controlled nuclear fusion technology to set off a wave of energy revolution again after the materials revolution led by graphene. As early as after the astronaut training center on Anger Island was built, Starring Trade had launched a lunar probe to search for lunar ice buried under the soil to determine the landing point of the colony. Fortunately, in a crater with a diameter of more than 100 kilometers, the lunar probe found a reservoir of lunar ice. The proven reserves are more than 56 million tons, distributed in the lunar soil at a depth of 500 to 1000 meters. When Kerwin reported this news to Jiang Chen immediately ordered the launch of a lunar rocket and sent space volunteers to land on the moon, taking the first step in space colonization. Chapter 852 Colonists set sail. The entire lunar colonization plan is divided into 3 steps. In order to show the public the aerospace strength of Starring Trade, the entire colonization process will be tracked and broadcast live to the world 24 hours a day on the official website. The first lunar rocket launched is called Starring 4, which is the largest carrier rocket of Starring Trade. As a rocket for lunar landing, unlike other rockets in the Starring series, it adopts a 3-stage propulsion mode similar to normal rockets. As the first rocket, it will carry tools, materials, some daily necessities and 2 pilots for the colonists to build a base. For the arrival of this day, Kerwin and other staff members of the Space Launch Center have been preparing for too long. In the Launch Center, there are not only staff members, but also reporters from major flat and 3-dimensional media, observers from the United Nations Space Department, the United States, France, China, Russia, Britain and other countries, as well as Jiang Chen, chairman of Future Group. When the ignition order was issued, under the attention of the public, the thick fog quickly dissipated from the launch site. Carrying a long trajectory, Starring 4 carried the hope and pride of the people of the new country and flew into the blue sky. Landing on the moon is a long waiting process. After the rocket is launched, it does not fly to the moon in a straight line. It has to go through several orbit changes along the way. The first thing that Starring 4 enters is the standby orbit, which is a circular orbit around the Earth. The spacecraft operates here like a satellite. The 2 pilots conduct various inspections on the spacecraft. After confirming that all the equipment is normal, they decide whether to head to the moon. If there is a problem, they will return to the Earth and cancel the launch. Everyone's heart is in their throat, and their eyes are fixed on the holographic screen in front of them, and the green dot around the Earth. After several hours of waiting, the feedback everything is normal came from the standby orbit. Kerwin was relieved, wiped the sweat from his palms, and gave an order in a deep voice. Starring 4 is alright, head to the moon. Received. After receiving the order from the ground command center, Starring 4 operated on the standby orbit for 1.5 weeks. The 3-stage rocket ignited again, seized the opportunity, and entered the moon flying orbit at a speed of nearly 11 km per second. So far, the entire launch plan has been more than half successful. Kelvin breathed a sigh of relief and wiped the sweat from his cheeks. He felt soaked, even though he hadn't done any strenuous work. Reporters from major media came forward, carrying cameras and microphones to interview him. However, he just waved his hand, handed the opportunity to speak to his assistant, and walked towards the lounge. Congratulations, Mr. Jiang. So far, the launch procedure has been smooth. If there are no accidents in the next 60 hours, you will become the second country in the world to successfully send humans to the moon. Henry, the special observer of the United Nations, smiled and extended his hand when he walked in front of Jiang Chen. Since Starring Trade launched the first rocket, he has been stationed on Koro Island because of the frequent space activities of the new country. At first, he was quite resentful about this, but Jiang Chen provided him with good food and drink, so he couldn't say anything to complain. In the past 2 years, he has gained a lot of weight, and he has become accustomed to life in the new country. After the completion of Penglai City, he simply bought a house there, planning not to return to New York after retirement, and settled down here directly. It can be said that he has watched the space industry in Singapore grow from its inception to the current manned moon landing. Putting aside his position, he is sincerely happy for Starring Trade. Thank you for your good words, Jiang Chen said with a smile, looking at the reporters who were trying to break through the bodyguard's blockade, and then continued, let's eat something together. I haven't eaten a grain of rice since this morning. Me too, Henry said with a smile, and walked to the cafeteria with Jiang Chen. Because there are many foreign guests, the cafeteria staff also performed beyond their level to prepare a sumptuous dinner. Jiang Chen saw the American delegation sitting in the corner, chewing pork chops, fried shrimps and ham, while talking about the launch of Starring Trade today. Obviously, they were shocked by the smooth launch of Starring Trade. Although they successfully sent people from the Earth to the moon in the 1960s, they succeeded in doing this from the failed Apollo 1 to 11. How much sweat, sacrifice, and budget they have put in this process, only NASA themselves know. However, the most difficult obstacles to the moon landing were also easily overcome by Starring Trade, which shocked them and made them deeply frustrated. Perhaps, as the officials of the Ministry of Defense revealed to them, Starring Trade has already surpassed the United States in missile technology, and the launch vehicle is just another manifestation of this technological advantage. After dinner, Jiang Chen met with representatives from the United States, France, China, Russia, Britain and other countries. Regardless of their positions, they all congratulated him first. But at the same time, these representatives from various countries also asked about Starring Trade's next plan. Jiang Chen spoke frankly about the information that could be revealed. As for those contents involving corporate secrets, Jiang Chen would never reveal a single cent, no matter how the other party asked in a roundabout way. Until 10 o'clock, reporters from major media were still lingering in the reception hall of the launch center. Without spending time on these reporters, Jiang Chen came to the dormitory arranged for him by the staff. He will stay on this island for the next few days until the entire launch mission is completed. How could he miss this moment of witnessing history? Representatives from other countries thought so too, and they turned down the hotel that Starring Trade arranged for them, and asked the staff to arrange dormitories for them. Even though the accommodation was a bit shabby, no one complained. On the second day, Starring 4 shuttled in the dark space, the 3-stage rocket had been extinguished, and the speed was getting slower and slower. When it reached the middle of the Earth-Moon transfer orbit, the speed had dropped to 3 km per second. On the third day, the 3-stage rocket of Starring 4 reignited and entered the lunar capture orbit. At this time, Starring 4 had reached the closest point to the moon, but it did not start landing immediately. At this time, its speed was quite fast, and it needed to adjust the phase several times in the elliptical orbit, from the 12-hour orbit to the 127-minute orbit, before it could start landing. The ground command center and the astronauts on the rocket also ushered in the most critical moment before landing. If the speed of the rocket is not well controlled at this time, the rocket will easily fall off the orbit if it is not careful, and the remaining fuel is not enough to correct the orbit. The final result is that the entire rocket becomes an uncontrolled space junk, and the astronauts can only lie in the hibernation chamber and wait for many years until the technical conditions allow it, and then be picked up by future generations to end the hibernation. Fortunately, the accident did not happen. According to the orbit calculated by the quantum computer, Starlink 4 successfully hit the scheduled landing point on the moon. It took 67 hours. When the lunar dust was raised, all the staff including Kerwin, as well as observers from the United Nations Space Agency and the United States, France, China, Russia, Britain and other countries, all couldn't help but fist pumping, applauding, and cheering. Even if they have different nationalities, at this moment, they are looking up at the first step of mankind towards the stars as human beings. Chapter 853 Exciting Moments. Astronaut, ready. Distance 30 meters. Descent speed 3 meters per second. Sufficient fuel. Steady. Distance 15 meters. Astronaut, landing successful. Repeat, landing successful. Praise change. We succeeded. Ground operator. Confirmed lunar dust. Jiang Chen, congratulations. At this time, the Space Launch Center had already cheered. People hugged each other, leaving tears of excitement and joy. The reporters forgot to interview and just silently recorded this historic moment. Starring 4 landed successfully. When this news was first announced on the official website by Starring Trade, all the people of New Zealand cheered. People took to the streets and shops hung banners. Just like celebrating Christmas or the Spring Festival, people celebrated this historic moment with actions, cheering for the 2 astronauts who landed on the moon, and cheering for Starring Trade. Media from various countries also reported on the success of Starring Trade's moon landing. In particular, China, which has good relations with New Zealand, highly praised the 2 Chinese people who landed on the moon on CTV. These tense and peaceful 67 hours were awarded with the ultimate reward at the moment when the moon dust was raised. On the big screen of the ground command center, in front of the computer and TV screens of people from all over the world, and on the holographic screen of the future mobile phone, an astronaut in a white spacesuit, carefully holding the handrail, stepped onto the land of the moon, the first Chinese to land on the moon. Praise Starring Trade. What's so great about the moon? We Chinese have also been there. Haha. Incredible. The second person to land on the moon was not the old space power Russia, nor the rising China, but this small country in the Pacific. How did such a small country do it? Nonsense. Our professor has just proved it. The Asian who just landed on the moon, although he is of Chinese descent, his bloodline must be our big Korean people. Okay, the whole universe is yours. The silence on the moon could not hear the noise on the internet. Just as the whole world offered words of blessing, praise, jealousy, or suspicion to these 2 people, the second Chinese astronaut also stood on the land of the moon. Incredible, really incredible. The first Chinese to land on the moon used the word incredible twice to express his shock at this moment. Standing on the moon and looking up at the earth, the home is like a glowing sphere, reflecting the dazzling brilliance, and even the entire universe is eclipsed. If you don't see it with your own eyes, it's really unimaginable. On the moon, which is closer to the sky, you can't see a single star. The 2 astronauts planted the flag of the new country on the surface of the moon and took a group photo. The live broadcast ends here. After completing the moon landing activities, they will dismantle the 50 tons of supplies loaded on the rocket, build a simple lunar ice drilling well on the ice layer, and a simple living unit fixed on the surface of the moon, and send an unmanned lunar rover to further explore the geological information and meteorite activity information near the landing site. The subsequent 2 Starring 4 rockets will bring them 20 companions and a total of 100 tons of equipment and living supplies. In the days to come, Starring Trade will launch a Starring 4 to the moon every month to deliver supplies and production equipment to these pioneer colonists until the space elevator is built. Just after the successful launch of the first Starring 4, the second rocket was also pushed onto the launch pad. With a successful precedent, everyone in the command center was much more confident this time than 3 days ago. After witnessing the successful landing of the first moon landing rocket, Jiang Chen had achieved his goal of witnessing history and left the southernmost island of the new country. When he returned to Koro Island, the festive atmosphere on the island was still strong. Many tourists came to this southern island from afar because of this gimmicky moon colonization plan. Small vendors and large shopping malls have seized the business opportunity, holding activities and selling aerospace-related dolls, peripherals, and souvenirs, celebrating the success of the entire national project as a festival. It is not just these ordinary businessmen who seize a business opportunity. The virtual reality online game God Level Continent under Future Moon technology opened a special reward copy, Guanghan Palace, on the same day. Players can double their income by killing monsters in the copy and can get expensive moon landing commemorative equipment by killing the boss's demonized jade rabbit. Just 3 days after the successful moon landing, the nutritional mixture under Future Moon Biology also followed suit and launched the same as astronauts, directly using the portraits of 2 astronauts as product endorsements and using Moon People Say It's Good after drinking it as the advertising slogan, which became popular in the north and south of China next door. As the saying goes, it is easy to go from frugality to luxury, but it is difficult to go from luxury to frugality. After living a luxurious life, it is a bit uncomfortable to live an ordinary life in various senses. Jiang Chen considers himself a person who can adapt to circumstances, but this time he only lived in the dormitory of the Space Launch Center for 3 days, and he missed the life in a mansion. Although he can travel to the end of the world at any time, it is not easy for him to use his ability to enjoy himself in such a crowded place. After returning to Koro Island, Jiang Chen went home to take a shower and rest for a day. The next day, Jiang Chen got up early. After eating the breakfast prepared by Asia, he drove out. Instead of going to the future building, he went to the presidential palace. President Zhang has been busy with diplomatic issues these days. First, the oil plant, then the moon colonization plan. The series of actions of the future group and Starring Trade have really caused a lot of trouble for the Singapore government. For example, a well-known international environmental protection organization requires that Singapore must restrict domestic companies' research in the field of genetic engineering. Unauthorized large-scale planting of genetically modified crops that have not undergone long-term clinical trials may lead to an ecological crisis. If the Singapore government does not intend to verify its safety, it must at least provide the international community with the DNA code of oil palm and send it to Europe for professionals to identify whether it is safe. These are still normal. As long as it involves asking for DNA codes, you can more or less see the shadows of certain countries behind it. Even more bizarre is yet to come. Just 1 day ago, the American Moon Real Estate Company sued the Future Group in Singapore, protesting that it had violated the legal assets of Moon Real Estate. Speaking of this Moon Real Estate, it is also a wonder left over from history. When the company's founder Hope was looking up the Outer Space Treaty law enacted in 1967, he accidentally discovered that all United Nations members had signed and agreed that the sovereignty of outer space celestial bodies does not belong to any country, but the treaty does not stipulate that private individuals cannot own outer space celestial bodies, so he declared his ownership of the moon and the other 8 planets in the solar system and their satellites. Of course, the Singapore court dismissed their lawsuit, and the lawyer of the Future Group even suggested on a private social account that these unreasonable people go to see a brain doctor. Not to mention that Singapore did not recognize the documents they produced at all. They even got the prosecution wrong. It was not the Future Group that landed on the moon, but Starring Trade. Although the behind-the-scenes shareholders of the 2 companies are the same person, sometimes the media reports are occasionally confused. Chapter 854 New Asian Economic Cooperation Organization. This is a document from the Nobel Committee, and this is from the International BCBO Certification Alliance. Zhang Yaping said as he picked out some letters from the pile of documents on the table and put them aside. And these. My secretary will come and take these away in a while. Jiang Chen glanced at the pile of documents with some fear of trouble and did not reach out to look through them. I didn't come to you today to deal with these troublesome trivial matters. Anything else? Zhang Yaping held his forehead with a headache. Well, there's something else. Jiang Chen took out an envelope from his arms, put it on the table, and smiled a little implicitly. I have to trouble you again. Looking at the 2 dark circles under his eyes, Jiang Chen felt a little embarrassed to continue to trouble others. It's okay. I'm used to it anyway. Zhang Yaping sighed, picked up the letter, opened it and glanced at it. An interested look gradually appeared on his face. New Pan-Asian Economic and Trade Cooperation Organization? I remember there is a CN in Asia. There is also a Maritime Economic Cooperation Organization next to it. Why do we need to establish one separately? Because our influence is enough. If we establish the Pan-Asian Economic Cooperation, we can at least win over 3 member countries. That is, Morocco, Malaysia, and the Philippines. Jiang Chen smiled, opened his watch, called up a map, and drew a red circle on the map of Asia. Compared with ASEAN, the Pan-Asian Economic Cooperation will focus more on economic cooperation. We will work closely on a series of issues such as international trade, labor and environment, intellectual property rights, and tariffs. As long as we have enough influence in the economy, will the other 2 areas be too far away? We already have 3 partners, and how many people we can get to join next depends on your diplomatic skills. Jiang Chen looked at Zhang Yaping and said, diplomatic means. Zhang Yaping pushed his glasses on the bridge of his nose and pondered for a moment. The key is, what can we use as a bargaining chip to convince other Asian countries to join the Asian Economic Cooperation Organization we established? If we just write a blank check, even the most skilled diplomats will probably not be able to produce any results. There are 2 bargaining chips, high technology and new reserves. Jiang Chen said confidently. High technology, new reserves? Zhang Yaping frowned and repeated in confusion. The countries around us have abundant natural resources and labor, but their technological conditions are generally relatively backward. I believe that, if we use technology as bait, they will not be unmoved. Jiang Chen smiled. So, we can use this as a starting point to persuade them to join our Pan-Asian Economic Cooperation. Will you share the technology with them? Zhang Yaping glanced at Jiang Chen in disbelief. He knew very well how stingy the future group was in keeping its technology secret. To a limited extent. Jiang Chen smiled. For example, the demand for graphene materials is increasing, and the application fields are becoming more and more extensive. It is absolutely not enough to rely on the production of the new Malaysia Special Zone. We can share some basic technologies that do not involve sensitive fields, and then use their labor to earn profits for us, while focusing on higher level interests. What about the new reserve? The new reserve can provide investment for the members of the Pan-Asian Economic Cooperation. Jiang Chen said. I remember that the main funds of the new reserve come from the future bank. Do you have so much money? This kind of national level investment is not a matter of 1 or 2 billion. Zhang Yaping questioned. Now we may only be able to take out 1 or 2 billion, but it does not mean that we will still have so much next year. Imagine above our heads, there are unlimited resources there. By this time next year, I assure you that, whether it is US dollars, RMB or rubles, the meaning to the future group will become just a number. Jiang Chen's face showed a confident smile. Looking at the confident smile on Jiang Chen's face, Zhang Yaping shrugged, said nothing more, and put away the letter. Okay, since you said so, then, I will probably be able to make time next week, and the first stop will be Malaysia. There's no rush for this matter. There's no problem with the visit at the end of the year. I'm waiting for your good news. Jiang Chen smiled and stood up. The technologies we are willing to open up for cooperation are all in that letter. You can discuss with your chief of staff and draft a specific plan. I thought you would put the specific plan on my desk. Zhang Yaping said with a frown. Although he expected Jiang Chen to pit him again, he never expected that this guy himself proposed the Pan-Asian Economic Cooperation, but he didn't even write a specific implementation plan. This is not just cleaning up his ass. This time, the presidential office has to shit for him. Haha, you can think about this kind of thing slowly. I will send the president of the new Federal Reserve to discuss with you, as well as the economic advisor of the Future People Group think tank. We have a lot of talents in the economic field, but we are relatively lacking in the political field. So I said there is no rush. This thing needs to be discussed by everyone. Laughing irresponsibly, Jiang Chen said goodbye to Zhang Yaping and walked out of the presidential office. After leaving the presidential palace, Jiang Chen got into his Lamborghini. Aisha, who was waiting in the car, took off the sunglasses on her small nose and casually hung them on her collar while skillfully starting the car. Where are you going? To the port. Aren't you going to the company today? No, take me to the ghost agent's headquarters. I have something to do. Jiang Chen looked at the time on his watch and said, the ghost agent's headquarters is located on a small island hundreds of kilometers away from Koro Island, where the first batch of agents received training. The villa in the center of the island was originally Jiang Chen's private property, but was later converted into a training facility for training this special force that is directly loyal to him. With the expansion of influence, Ghost Agent no longer uses online recruitment to obtain fresh blood, but instead uses charities supported by Future Group to take in homeless orphans from war-torn areas around the world. The selected orphans are often 13 to 15 years old, which is the age group that is most susceptible to brainwashing. With the assistance of AI programs, they will receive a semi-brainwashing education to wash away their original religious beliefs and ensure that they can offer the highest loyalty to Jiang Chen even without relying on slave chips. This practice may be against the spirit of humanitarianism, but from another perspective, if there had not been a helping hand from the Future Group, they would have probably died in war and hunger in a more miserable way. After all, the Future Group is a company, not a charity. Jiang Chen only promised that the age of 30 is the retirement age for ghost agents. After the age of 30, they can choose to retire or transfer to civilian work and leave their former life as agents. Genetic drugs will make their lifespans about 20 years longer than ordinary people. From the perspective of equivalent exchange, what they get is equal to what they pay. Chapter 855 Ghost Island. Since it was determined to be the training base for the ghost agents, the island has been erased from the official map of the new country and given a new name, Ghost Island. This name really fits its current identity. The nearby shipping is designated as a military restricted area. No one can approach the island within 20 kilometers, except those who are authorized. The only people who are allowed to enter and exit the island without authorization are Jiang Chen and Aisha, the chief instructor and director of the ghost agents. At noon, a Black Hawk helicopter flew from the sea and sky and landed on the tarmac. The blonde and blue-eyed female instructor wearing a mechanical exoskeleton came forward, confirmed the identities of the two, stood at attention and saluted, and then took the two into the training facility in the center of the island. Along the way, Jiang Chen saw many exotic faces. They mainly came from the turbulent Eastern Europe and the Middle East, and there were also some yellow-skinned Asians. In addition to the necessary skills of the agents, the educational program on the Phantom Helmet here will also teach them basic knowledge including language, mathematics, physics and chemistry. As the three walked along the edge of the training ground, the instructors and young students stood at attention and saluted. Jiang Chen noticed that the young eyes looking at him were full of gratitude and admiration. While he was relieved, he couldn't help but feel uncomfortable. In addition to paying money to buy their lives, he believed that he had not done anything worthy of their admiration. The reason why they had such a perception was only because of the subtle influence of the education program and the Phantom Helmet and the fact that it was the Future Group that rescued them from the war-torn area. Of course, putting aside the guilt of brainwashing the girls, Jiang Chen was still very happy to be looked at by so many beauties with admiration. Because of their good genes, and after more than 2 years of conditioning, these originally thin girls have grown into curvy girls. The tight lines under the military green shirts show the youthful and healthy vitality. The most exciting thing is that, even if he makes unreasonable demands and calls someone he likes to his room, no one will show resistance, but will offer himself wholeheartedly. Under Aisha's confused gaze, Jiang Chen suddenly coughed and dispelled those unhealthy thoughts in his mind. It's better not to lose integrity so cleanly. On the way, Jiang Chen learned that the blonde female instructor was named Betty, one of the first batch of ghost agents trained by Aisha herself. Now she is 21 years old, from Ukraine in Eastern Europe, and is a tall and cheerful girl. Because she is too tall and not suitable for frontline work, she was transferred to Ghost Island to train ghost agents. Under the leadership of instructor Betty, Jiang Chen and Aisha came to the archive room located in the basement of the villa in the center of the island. There is a small civilian-grade quantum computer stored here, which serves as a server for more than 500 phantom helmets on the island. Through the double inspection of iris and fingerprints, Jiang Chen obtained the authority of the quantum computer. Then, he took out a thumb-sized USB flash drive from his pocket and inserted it into the card slot of the mainframe. Soon, a series of progress bars read across the holographic screen, completing the installation of the program. "What is this?" Betty asked. "This is a new training program. The ghost agents will be equipped with new equipment. I need you to preview it on the phantom helmet first." Jiang Chen tapped his finger on the holographic screen a few times, and then closed the operation permission. "There are new equipment again." Jiang Chen's words really shocked the blonde instructor. The invisible cloak that can disappear out of thin air is shocking enough. Now the chairman told her that the ghost agents will also introduce new equipment. How new can it be? Will it go to the sky? However, this suspense did not stay for too long. The first batch of equipment shipped in has been installed on the Black Hawk helicopter when Jiang Chen came. And these new weapons are nothing else but the VIP drones seized from Sun Jiao and in the end of the world, and the round-headed and round-brained reptile robots. One is a low-altitude attack drone with a high payload, and the other is a fully armed mobile firepower platform. In the training ground, Jiang Chen instructed Aisha to demonstrate to these ghost agents how to control these powerful support weapons through the watch to destroy soft and hard ground targets. If the hummingbird drone with a payload of only 60 small caliber bullets is just a mosquito, then the VIP is a fierce eagle. And as for the reptile robot that vents firepower with a minigun and a grenade launcher, it is an absolute demolition artifact. Not only can it effectively kill soft targets, it can even tear apart the bunker itself, and even threaten armored units at close range. After seeing such a powerful weapon, the trainees and instructors in the training ground all opened their eyes wide at the same time. After recovering from the shock, Betty expressed her confusion. "This kind of weapon, can we really use it? Weapons with such powerful firepower, but for agents whose main job is to collect intelligence and infiltrate investigations, these are all useless. Moreover, the size of the VIP drone is at least dozens of times that of the hummingbird, almost half a person's height, and it is not convenient to carry around. As for the reptile, just by looking at the rocket launcher embedded on the top of the turtle shell, you can tell that this thing must be used on the front battlefield." However, Jiang Chen's answer was very concise and clear. "It can be used." Seeing that Betty still didn't understand what he meant, Jiang Chen smiled and explained. "In the future, the work of ghost agents will not only be limited to infiltration and intelligence gathering. You may also be able to carry out decapitation and destruction of ground facilities in cooperation with the Sea Lion Special Forces. And you who are good at hiding and infiltration are more suitable to use these support weapons to support the Sea Lions who are the frontal troops." Betty nodded in understanding, but then spoke again with some hesitation. "I have another question. I wonder if it's convenient to ask." "Don't be shy, just ask." Jiang Chen smiled. "Is this going to war again?" Betty asked carefully. Hearing this question, Jiang Chen couldn't help laughing and said in a teasing tone, "War? The war has already started. Yes, the war with the Freemasons has already started. The civil war in Madagascar has entered a white-hot stage, and it's almost time to start closing the net. After this, it's Turkey, Ukraine, and then Europe. The Starring Trade Association will extend its tentacles to the world and completely crush its living space. In order to avoid pushing the situation into a more serious abyss, he would try to avoid launching a large-scale war, but use these agents and the Sea Lion Special Forces as much as possible to surgically eliminate the power of the Freemasons." After showing the new equipment to these future agents, Jiang Chen then inspected their training and had dinner with these orphans on the island. Before the sun was about to completely set below the horizon, Jiang Chen took Aisha and returned to Koro Island on the Black Hawk waiting on the tarmac. After returning to the villa, Jiang Chen took a shower and was about to go back to the room to be intimate with the lovely Aisha for a while. Suddenly, the watch shook a few times. Linling's call request came from the end of the world, saying that there was good news for him to tell him, and asked him to come back quickly. Seeing this, Jiang Chen had to give up temporarily with regret. After returning to the room, he traveled back to the end of the world. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 856, Breakthrough in Antimatter Technology. What is this? Jiang Chen couldn't help but ask, looking at the black oil storage tank standing in the backyard of the villa and the intricately entangled pipelines. The crystallization of technology, Linling said proudly, with her chest puffed out, and the corners of her mouth curled into a crescent. Speaking in human terms, Jiang Chen said with a frown. In short, it's a magnetic confinement device used to store antimatter. Before Linling finished her words, Jiang Chen subconsciously took a step back. Wow, such a large amount of antimatter? It's all in here? Looking at the expression on Jiang Chen's face, Linling laughed and waved her hand. No, there is only 0.1 milligrams of antimatter in the middle, but it takes such a large magnetic confinement device to store it. Hearing Linling's explanation, Jiang Chen was relieved. Tens of milligrams of antimatter as fuel to propel the spacecraft. It can reach Mars in 6 weeks. 1 kilogram of antimatter exposed to the air can blow up the entire Earth. 1 ton of antimatter can turn the Earth into the second largest asteroid belt in the solar system. It is not without reason that the Scientific Ethics Committee on this timeline prohibits the development of antimatter. This thing is too dangerous to be placed on Earth. The price of destroying everyone together may only require one experimental failure. However, this 0.1 milligrams of antimatter actually needs such a large oil tank to store it, which really surprised Jiang Chen. After all, the gift given to him by the Void survivors is only the size of a bottle of pulse. As if she saw what Jiang Chen was thinking, Linling coughed a little embarrassedly. Ahem. After all, our research on antimatter is only in the initial stage. They should be more likely to contact antimatter in the void than us. Why? Jiang Chen asked curiously. There is a saying that the void itself does not have the concept of space, and the positive and antimatter existing in it cannot be connected through a specific medium. It is very troublesome to explain, just like we are in a desert without an oasis, and want to find a drop of water, and they are on the beach, with sand in their left hand and water in their right hand. Of course, this is just a guess. After all, people who have taken the void cannot come back. Linling explained. Is that so? But what can this 0.1 milligrams of antimatter do? Nothing. Linling shook her head and said with regret, it is not difficult to manufacture antimatter. In the 21st century, a trace amount of antimatter can be briefly observed through the Large Hadron Collider. It's just that this antimatter particle exists for a very short time, and there is no way to preserve it in a universe full of positive matter. After analyzing the technology of the void, the magnetic confinement device I designed can store a small amount of antimatter, but I can't think of any use for this thing other than bombs. It is not suitable for bombs either, and its cost is more than 1,000 times that of a bomb of the same equivalent. The soil storage. What is the explosive equivalent of the magnetic confinement device? Jiang Chen pointed at the device that looked like an oil storage tank and asked. According to the mass energy equation, the energy released by the annihilation of 1 g of antimatter is equivalent to that of 3 nuclear bombs, and the actual killing effect may exceed 10 nuclear bombs. Linling quickly gave the answer. The killing power of 1 g of antimatter is only equivalent to that of 3 nuclear bombs. Considering its production cost, this 0.1 milligrams of antimatter is really useless. However, as a beginning of science, this result is already good. To reward Linling's efforts, Jiang Chen brought her 3 boxes of puddings made by a Belgian pastry master from the real world. Seeing Linling happily running to the kitchen with the boxes in her arms, Jiang Chen couldn't help but smile knowingly. As usual when she came back, Yao cooked a table full of her specialty dishes. Most of the fresh vegetables on the table came from the farm in the Garden of Eden. while the roast turkey and braised pork came from the real world. Now that life in the NAC-governed area is improving, the days of eating canned food are gone forever. If it weren't for the grey-yellow radiation cloud in the sky and the devastated streets outside the window, just sitting at this table would not feel the atmosphere of the end of the world. The 5 people gathered around the table and happily enjoyed a sumptuous lunch. The topic ranged from interesting things in the base to the construction of Iju Island. It is said that after the crisis of mud crabs was resolved, the crab eggs and crab roe there flowed into Wanghai City as specialties and were well received by the restaurants in the 6th district. Some businessmen with vision even opened canning factories to make delicious canned food from these crab roe and sell them to more distant places. As they chatted, the topic turned to the present, when they heard that the future group led by Jiang Chen had actually controlled 3 countries. Sun Jiao, Yao, Zio Ro, and Linling's eyes flashed with longing. It would be great if they could go there to take a look, but it was a pity that Linling had no idea about the research on interdimensional transmission of living things. But everyone believed that there would be such a day. After dinner, Jiang Chen went to the marshal's mansion and found Han Jianhe, who was handling military affairs. What is the situation in the north? After hearing Jiang Chen's question, Han Jianhe stopped writing, turned on the holographic screen, and locked the map to Han's Hang in the northern part of China. Jiang Chen looked at the big words United Command Area on the map and his eyes narrowed slightly. I remember they were in Lanzhou. In Lanzhou a year ago, Han Jianhe added, and after a pause, he continued, since last year, they have been migrating southward. Under the leadership of the new commander of the Union District, they have cleared the zombies in the Hanzhong area and gradually moved the population of the Northern Union District to the Hanzhong area, setting up settlements along this tributary of the Yangtze River. Why did they do this? Jiang Chen frowned. We sent out Aurora 20 to investigate the target area, but we didn't get any useful intelligence. They used anti-aircraft missiles to drive away our fighters. From any angle, they were quite unfriendly, Han Jianhe said. Jiang Chen looked at the map again. Migration means giving up everything that has been managed for many years, whether it is farmland or city walls, and the cost is quite high. He was very curious about what forced the country that was the first to move towards order on this land to abandon its land and leave its homeland. However, there are more realistic problems that he must face now. If the United District has migrated to the Hanzhong area, you can take a boat south along the Yangtze River to Wu City, and then go to Hongcheng next to it, the outpost of NAC in the east. The series of actions taken by the United District in Hongcheng have aroused his vigilance. Thinking of the worst, maybe they have been planning to attack Wanghai City for a long time. During the coup in the 6th block, the video footage that the Crimson Chamber of Commerce produced was exactly the declaration of war that the United District had made against the survivors of Wanghai City several years ago. In that video footage, the commander of the United District seemed to have mentioned the word treasure. The president of the Crimson Chamber of Commerce interpreted it as a wreckage of the Rod of God, but this turned out not to be the case. Later, after the NAC recaptured the center of Wanghai City from the aliens, it did not find anything that could be called treasure. Have you ever tried to have our pilots bypass Hanzhong and fly directly to Lanzhou? I'm curious about what happened there that caused these hundreds of thousands of people to migrate south collectively. Jiang Chen said in a deep voice. Of course, but from aerial reconnaissance, our pilots did not collect much useful intelligence. Han Jianhe replied. Is that so? Jiang Chen's brows gradually furrowed. Sorry, I overslept. My schedule has been completely reversed these days, and I have to adjust it. TT Chapter 857. The colony begins. There is no better option at the moment, except to do a good job of defense. The deterrent power of Aurora 20 against the countries in the present world is not applicable to the Northern Union District. Although Aurora 20 has not detected the existence of fighter jets in the Union District, they, who have inherited the Pan-Asian cooperation technology, can pose a fatal threat to Aurora 20 with ground-based air defense missiles and laser air defense weapons. If a war breaks out, the battlefield of both sides will undoubtedly be on the ground. After staying in the apocalypse for 3 days, Jiang Chen returned to the present world. This time he brought back 10 Aurora 20s newly produced by the military factory in the 6th block, and the K1 mechanical exoskeleton production line newly built by the Zhao Group. In the past, the mechanical exoskeletons on this side of the present world were all produced by the military factory in the 6th block, and Jiang Chen acted as a porter to transfer the materials over there. However, now the apocalypse side must bear the pressure from the Union District, and also divide the few production capacities to serve the present world, which is really a bit stretched. Now the military industry of future people has begun to take shape, and is fully capable of integrating this production line. Following the Hummingbird UAV, another set of 22nd century arms production line has settled in Angier Island. The entire set of production equipment covers an area of tens of thousands of square meters. Jiang Chen chose the Coconut Island where he docked the water drop number 1 as the transfer warehouse. After transferring all the equipment to the island, Jiang Chen called the transport ship a Starring Trade and dispatched a frigate for escort and transported this batch of equipment to Angier Island without pulling down a screw. With the manpower and resources of the end of the world, there are obvious bottlenecks in the development of industry, but this bottleneck does not exist for the Future People group. Future People mining will continuously transport ore to the Zinma Special Zone, which will be roughly processed by the steel mills in the Zinma Special Zone, and then transported to Angier Island. The Future People military will remelt these finished steels, refine them into C-shaped steels and pour them into molds. The more sophisticated internal structure will also be completed by the factory on Angier Island. All the mechanical exoskeletons produced can not only fill the equipment gap of the currently expanding foreign legions, but also meet the needs of the 3 major NAC legions in the end of the world. Because there has been no war for a long time, the popularity of exoskeletons in several legions in the end of the world is not as good as in the present world. I believe this predicament will soon be improved. 2 weeks have passed since the start of the lunar colonization plan. From the images sent back from the moon, it can be seen that the lunar colony in Guanghan City has begun to take shape. Several long barracks are placed on the edge of the crater, and colonists in spacesuits set up solar generators on the open space. Before the nuclear fusion generator is delivered to Guanghan City, they can only rely on solar energy to obtain energy to maintain the operation of the colony. The mining station not far away is a mine for drilling lunar ice and a mine for excavating and collecting lunar soil. Lunar ice is one of the sources of drinking water for the colony, and it is also the main source of oxygen for the colony. The oxygen tanks carried on the spacecraft are only enough for the 24 colonists to survive for a week, and in the following time, all oxygen will be obtained by electrolysis of water. From the current point of view, this is the lowest cost way to obtain oxygen. 1 L of water electrolysis can generate 0.623 cubic meters of oxygen and 1.25 cubic meters of hydrogen. According to the 15% oxygen content of air, the pure oxygen consumed by each person per day is only 0.5 cubic meters under normal atmospheric pressure. As for the byproduct hydrogen, it will be stored in special containers and will be used with carbon dioxide produced by breathing to generate methanol and a small amount of water under high temperature catalysts. Methanol will be used as an industrial raw material in production. In this way, a simple cycle is formed. Of course, Jiang Chen sent them to the moon, not just to let them solve the problem of how to survive. In addition to driving the lunar rover out to explore for minerals and maintain these life support devices every day, they are also responsible for assisting ground researchers in carrying out scientific research. Among all the scientific research projects, the key one is a helium-3 collection project. The small mine that excavates the lunar soil is a facility that shoulders such an important task. Since there is no global dipole magnetic field protection on the moon, the solar wind containing carbon, nitrogen, and rare gas ions such as helium, neon, argon, and krypton can drive straight in, bombarding the lunar surface and entering the lunar soil particles, making the lunar soil contain a considerable amount of helium-3. As for the value of this energy, here is a set of data that can be intuitively expressed. 1 kilogram of helium-3, if used for power generation, can generate 19 megawatts of energy, enough to provide lighting for Moscow for 6 years. and only 10 tons of helium-3 are needed to generate enough electricity for the entire China for a year. In addition, for every ton of helium-3 extracted from the lunar soil, 6,300 tons of hydrogen, 70 tons of nitrogen, and 1,600 tons of carbon can be obtained. However, compared with the value of the former, the value of these byproducts can be ignored. The lunar soil itself is also rich in aluminum, iron, magnesium, titanium and rare earth metals. Jiang Chen already has nuclear fusion power generation technology. The source of electricity for Penglai City is a nuclear fusion generator obtained from the end of the world Yazhou Island, as well as several deuterium storage tanks. What needs to be solved now is how to efficiently mine the helium-3 from the lunar soil. This is also one of the main tasks of these colonists and researchers. Just a colony of 24 people cost Jiang Chen 1 billion New Zealand dollars. But he believes that the money is worth it. After watching the video, Kerwin found Jiang Chen. NASA hopes that we can disclose the living conditions of the colonists and share the exploration of the moon. They are willing to exchange this information with us for a file that has not yet been disclosed to the United Nations Space Agency. Is that information important? I mean this. Jiang Chen asked. Kelvin thought for a moment and then answered. Not very important. NASA officials revealed that those unpublished files are mainly about the analysis of creep rock and the distribution of helium-3 reservoirs in the lunar soil. Our researchers are also studying these things, but we don't know how far they have studied them. Then there is no need to exchange information with them. I believe you will be ahead of them. Jiang Chen paused for a while and then continued, but the living conditions of the colonists can be made public. After all, this is also part of the propaganda. Aren't there rumors on the internet now slandering us, saying that those astronauts are guinea pigs and are now dead? Shooting a short documentary about their lives is just a powerful counterattack. As for which content can be made public and which must be kept secret, I think you should know. You can rest assured about this. Kelvin smiled and nodded. After explaining this matter, Jiang Chen was about to leave, but Kelvin seemed to remember something and stopped him. Jiang Chen turned around and asked, anything else? One more thing. 2 days ago, our Space Launch Center received a visit application from the UK. Kelvin answered. Visit application? Don't we receive a bunch of visit applications every day? Jiang Chen said with a smile. This person's identity is a bit special. I can't just reject him directly, so I have to ask for your opinion. Kerwin said cautiously. Who? Is it the Queen of England? Jiang Chen joked. No, it's Hawking. Chapter 858 Scholar in a wheelchair. At the airport of Kora Island, Jiang Chen met Hawking, one of the greatest physicists of modern times, a professor in a wheelchair. However, his appearance at this moment was different from the widely circulated picture of Hawking paralysis on the internet. He was sitting in a wheelchair and was pushed by his assistant, and he was wearing a phantom helmet produced by Futureman Technology. Nice to meet you, Mr. Jiang Chen. I wonder if you have any way to open a small slit in the helmet? Wearing the helmet and using the electronic sound synthesis tool makes me feel much better. The doctor even said that I can live 2 more years, but then I won't be able to see anything. Hearing this, Jiang Chen was stunned for a moment and then laughed. I will let my technician study this problem. It shouldn't be difficult. Thank you very much. The electronic voice replied. Considering Hawking's influence in the scientific community, Jiang Chen did not refuse his request to visit the Space Launch Center. In a sense, he can better represent the world academic community than the researchers sent by NASA. Of course, he still knows what can be displayed and what cannot be displayed. They took a boat to the island, where the launch center is located. The bodyguard of Starring Trade took over his assistant's position and pushed the wheelchair beside Jiang Chen. This is a launch site. The Starring 4 is launched from here. That is used to launch other types of rockets. We have been active in space recently. Basically, there is a launch mission every week. Jiang Chen introduced and took him into the launch center. An enviable budget. Hawking said with emotion. Because I'm not spending taxpayers' money, but my own money. Jiang Chen smiled. After entering the launch center, Kerwin came up and took the 3 of them to the ground command center responsible for the Guanhan City colony. there. More than 50 staff members were busy in front of the computer, dealing with the work at hand. Hawking asked the person who helped him push the wheelchair to take off his helmet. At this time, he didn't want to talk. He just wanted to see what this place looked like. Kerwin came to a computer and tapped a few buttons on the touch screen. Soon, a holographic image was projected in front of everyone. The picture transmitted through the holographic screen was from Guanghan City 384,400 kilometers away. This is the Guanghan City colony. What do you want? Commander. An astronaut appeared in the camera and asked Kerwin. Report on the status of supplies in the colony. Okay, please wait. After listening to the astronaut's report on the status of oxygen, drinking water, lunar soil collection and other supplies in the colony, Hawking put on his phantom helmet again with the help of the starring trade bodyguards and expressed his heartfelt feelings. I have seen the future. I'm honored to receive this honor. Jiang Chen smiled. After a pause, Hawking continued. Humanity cannot put all its eggs in one basket, so it cannot bet on one planet. I said this a long time ago, but unfortunately, neither the British government nor the American government has ever taken it seriously. Spending taxpayers' money in Iraq is always better than throwing it into space, where there is no prospect, even if everyone knows that the future is there. History is always surprisingly similar. Columbus also lobbied Britain, France, Italy, and Portugal. It is amazing that the Icarus paradox is not only applicable to enterprises, but also to some superpowers. But the person standing in front of you is a big entrepreneur. Jiang Chen smiled. But you are still young, and being young is always good. Hawking said something meaningless using the synthesized electrons. Jiang Chen couldn't stay here forever. The group had a meeting about City waiting for him to preside over in the afternoon. After handing over the exchange visit to Kerwin, Jiang Chen was about to leave the Space Launch Center, but at this moment, his eyes suddenly fell on Hawking's wheelchair. What's the matter? As if he noticed this, Hawking, who had taken off his helmet, tapped his fingers on the keyboard on the armrest, and asked Jiang Chen in an electronic voice. Something. Jiang Chen nodded, looking at the old man with a smile. I have a proposal. I wonder if you are interested? At this moment, far away in Washington, D.C., a special hearing was being held in the Capitol. We must restart the Apollo program immediately. The Starlink trade has already started the lunar colonization. We have been ahead of the world in the moon landing for more than half a century, but now we are behind them. For the American people, this is unacceptable. Standing in front of the hearing, NASA Secretary Charles Bolden gave an impassioned speech to the members of the hearing, trying to persuade them to restart the Apollo program. However, the members of the hearing showed little interest. Some of them turned their pens, some raised their eyebrows and looked at Bolden, and some simply turned the document to the next page. Since 1972, NASA's budget has not increased, but has been cut by about 75%, and has remained so for more than 40 years. Unlike the Kennedy era, NASA at that time did not need to be so troublesome to apply for a budget. It only needed to say one sentence, the Soviets are also doing it, and a large budget would be approved immediately. Now, the president has agreed to restart the Apollo program, as long as Congress is willing to allocate the budget. However, what makes Bolden desperate is that Congress is not interested in the unowned land 384,400 kilometers away. The American people cannot accept it. Why do I feel that many American people have signed up to participate in the starring trade astronauts? A congressman asked with a smile. Do you think this is right? Bolden asked back. There is no right or wrong. The congressman sitting in the middle tapped the notebook with a pen. I need you to tell me, what visible benefits can the Apollo program bring us? In addition to boosting national confidence? Bolden was speechless, and after a long while he managed to squeeze out a sentence. Not all benefits can be seen. Several congressmen smiled at each other, and the congressman sitting at the top shrugged. But only visible benefits can convince taxpayers to pay. After the hearing, Bolden returned to NASA's office and slammed the prepared documents on the table. Congress is discussing the budget increase for the development of new anti-missile systems and anti-EMP weapons. This is a more urgent issue. Our chances of convincing them are almost zero. The assistant followed him into the door and closed the door. Then what does Hillary mean? Bolden said angrily. She may just draw a pie for us." The assistant smiled bitterly. But at this moment, the door was suddenly pushed open, and a NASA office staff walked in, put a newspaper on the desk, and said excitedly, "Look at this. And this." Bolden frowned and took the newspaper. When he saw the words circled in red, his eyes suddenly widened, and almost popped out. They actually, wait. At this moment, his eyes lit up. He put away the newspaper, and immediately walked out the door. "Where are you going?" "The White House. Our chance has come." Bolden disappeared at the door, leaving the two confused. Chapter 859. Nothing is impossible. The originally dull weekend became abuzz with excitement because of a video released by Starring Trade. The 30-minute documentary recorded the living conditions of 24 astronauts in space, including how they collected lunar ice, how to obtain oxygen for survival through water electrolysis, how to extract rare earth element from lunar soil, how to explore the land full of craters with lunar rovers, and the lunar greenhouse under construction. Since the controlled nuclear fusion technology is still in the confidential stage, the documentary did not explain the other uses of the colony collecting lunar soil, but only used the excuse of collecting rare earth resources. The astronaut in charge of the filming was an astronaut named Li Fang. Before signing up for the space colonization plan and receiving astronaut training, she worked as a reporter for the Koro Island Broadcasting and Television Station. When she received the task of filming a documentary from the Ground Command Center, she immediately volunteered to take on the task, and while filming, she also attached a vivid explanation. "Look at the greenhouse behind me. That's our lunar greenhouse. Although we have to get food through the monthly supply rockets, we will be able to eat potatoes grown on the moon in 3 months at the latest." Jim, who is responsible for taking care of these potatoes, said that the mashed potatoes made from lunar potatoes must be delicious. "I'm almost drooling." At the end of the film, the little girl ended with a very propaganda-like sentence. "If you love spaceflight like me, then join our great colonization cause as soon as possible." She didn't need to promote it at all. After seeing such a novel life on the moon, a wave of space fever swept the world. Curiosity is always the driving force for people to explore forward. When the originally unreachable space is within reach, even those who are not interested in the space industry at all have become interested in colonizing the moon under the influence of emotions. Previously, the rumor that the 24 astronauts had become space junk was immediately refuted with the release of this documentary. Others not only survived on the moon, but now they have begun to cultivate space crops on the moon. The day after the video was uploaded to the official website of Starring Trade, Americans who saw the dawn of lunar colonization logged onto the White House website and submitted a petition requesting the restart of the Apollo program. According to regulations, the White House must respond when the number of signatures exceeds 100,000. This time, the number of petitioners exceeded 100,000 in just 24 hours. In desperation, Hillary had to stand in front of the media and said that she would discuss with Congress the feasibility of restarting the Apollo program. However, she also emphasized that, even if the Apollo program was restarted, it would be impossible for the United States to follow Starring Trade's example and colonize the moon in the short term. However, at the end of her speech, she still satirized Starring Trade's space program. Starring Trade has spent tens of billions of dollars on the space colonization plan. They spent 1 to 2 years budget of NASA in half a year. They spent their own money, so I can't say anything about it, but as the president, I will not squander taxpayers' money on projects that seem to be meaningless at the moment. Instead of colonizing the moon, we might as well colonize the Sonora Desert. The Sonora Desert is a large desert at the border between the United States and Mexico. Except for stowaways, no one would be bored and break into the life forbidden zone. The implication is nothing more than satirizing Starring Trade for spending money on meaningless projects. But no matter what, this 30-minute video has completely ignited people's longing for exploring the universe. In the 3 days after the video was released, Starring Trade received more applications for space volunteers than the total of the past 2 months. More exciting news is yet to come. Shortly after the documentary was released, Hawking posted a message on his personal social account, saying that he had immigrated to Singapore, would resign from his professorship at Cambridge University, and become a professor of physics at Korea University, joining the space colonization plan of starring trade as a consultant. Stephen William Hawking, this name is well known in the scientific community. This man who suffers from Lou Gehrig's disease and can only move his eyes and 3 fingers, has proved the singularity theorem and black hole area theorem of general relativity, proposed the black hole evaporation theory, and made considerable contributions to unifying Einstein's theory of relativity and Planck's quantum mechanics. It can be said that he is the pride of the modern physics community in the UK. However, now, this pride of the British suddenly announced a change of nationality after visiting Singapore, which surprised British Prime Minister Theresa May and the Queen of England, who is already over 90 years old. When asked by media reporters why he made such a choice, Hawking's answer was quite frank. It was still the cold electronics sound, but the reporters who interviewed him all felt the true feelings. Science is borderless, and scientists are also borderless. In my later years, I saw the hope of human migration to space. Now I hope to be closer to my dream and use my shallow knowledge to do some small work for this dream. I hope you don't overinterpret it. This is just an old man who hopes to complete the last journey of his life in his own way. However, for this great scientist, British Prime Minister Theresa May even visited Coral Island in person, hoping to retain him. There are many ways to realize dreams. The European Space Agency is also discussing the moon landing plan recently. It is expected to establish a European colony on the moon in 2030 New Amsterdam. We need your help. Without caring about Jiang Chen standing next to her, this went straight to the point and threw an olive branch to Hawking, who had changed his nationality. However, Hawking's answer was very sharp. As long as you are still discussing, there will never be any results. This May was stunned. After a moment of silence, she couldn't help asking, "Excuse me, what did Future Group promise you? Why are you so determined to stay here?" Hearing this question, Hawking squeezed out a half smile with his stiff muscles and tapped 3 fingers on the armrest. "He promised that he could make me stand up." Stand up. Theresa was stunned, and then a hint of anger appeared on her face. She looked at Jiang Chen, who was standing next to her. "Mr. Jiang Chen, it is not a gentleman's act to deceive an old man." "Cheat?" Jiang Chen laughed. "I said I would make him stand up, so I can definitely make him stand up." "Really? As far as I know, Lou Gehrig's disease is an incurable disease, and modern medicine cannot solve this problem at all. And you said that you can cure Mr. Hawking's disease. If this is not fraud, what is it?" Theresa narrowed her eyes, and her crow's feet squeezed together. It must be said that this female prime minister who succeeded Cameron has the style of Iron Lady Thatcher. However, Jiang Chen, who has long been accustomed to power, can already face the pressure from the powerful calmly. Modern medicine can't cure it, but it doesn't mean that future human biology can't cure it. At this point, Jiang Chen smiled. "Don't forget that the T-virus vaccine that saves the world was developed by our research institute." After hearing this, Theresa looked at him blankly. "You mean, Future Group has found a cure for Lou Gehrig's disease? How is that possible?" Jiang Chen smiled confidently and said in an unquestionable tone, "For Future Group, nothing is impossible." Chapter 860, Overcoming Medical Problems. Lou Gehrig's disease, also known as amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, is scientifically known as Lou Gehrig's disease. After suffering from this disease, there is still hope for treatment in the early stage, but once it enters the late stage, the probability of recovery through clinical treatment is almost zero. Faced with Hawking's condition, all modern medicine can do is to control the patient's condition. However, for the technology of the 22nd century, it is not a big problem to treat this disease. The medical technology in the timeline of the end of the world is quite advanced. As of before the war, almost 90% of incurable diseases have been solved, and Lou Gehrig's disease is one of the diseases that have been solved. The simplest way to treat Lou Gehrig's disease is to use the smart medical cabin that Jiang Chen brought to the present world last time to cure Asia. No matter how serious the muscle tissue necrosis, atrophy and other symptoms are, as long as enough time and culture medium are spent, they can be effectively treated. As for the accumulated neurotoxic substances and glutamate accumulated between nerve cells, they can be cured by injecting special drugs. There are medical experts in the end of the world, and it is not difficult to prepare these drugs. With mixed emotions, the British Prime Minister left Singapore, ending his 3-day diplomatic visit. Before receiving treatment, Hawking asked Jiang Chen a very interesting question. Before I receive treatment, can I ask you a question? If you are going to ask me whether the operation will be painful, my answer is no. Jiang Chen replied in a humorous tone. It has nothing to do with my business. What I want to ask is about the homework you assigned to your students half a month ago. Why? The master of cosmology is also interested. Jiang Chen looked at the old man unexpectedly and asked, I'm just curious, have you discovered anything? The turbid eyes seemed to have the penetrating power of seeing through the universe, looking directly into Jiang Chen's eyes. Why do you think so? Jiang Chen asked with a smile. Because the number of rockets you have launched in the past few years is equivalent to the total number of launches by NASA in the past 10 years. Hawking tapped the keyboard with trembling fingers. With such frequent space activities, you will definitely discover something. What has NASA discovered in the past few decades? Jiang Chen asked in return. Hawking was silent for a long time and typed out a paragraph with his fingers intermittently. They never answered this question directly, but I'm sure they found something. You can pay attention to Area 51. It's not just a federal military base. Hawking did not elaborate on the details of Area 51. Obviously, as a scholar, he could not know too much information. At the end of the meeting, Jiang Chen asked a little abruptly, if there are extraterrestrial civilizations and they know we are here, do you think they will be hostile? Hawking answered while tapping the keyboard on the armrest. If you have seen my lectures, you should know that I have never doubted this. Jiang Chen smiled and stretched out his hand. It's an honor. We agree. Sorry, I can't shake your hand now. In mid-October, at the Koro City Hospital under Future Human Biology, Hawking entered the operating room accompanied by his 3 children who came from the UK, and lay down in the medical cabin with the help of medical staff. Considering that his muscles had atrophied to a very serious extent, the recovery time may be quite long. The international community has also paid wide attention to the medical problem of Future Human Biology's solution to Lou Gehrig's disease. Any terminal disease that is conquered is an immeasurable progress in the field of medical research. Even though the prevalence of Lou Gehrig's disease is not high, international medical organizations still have a strong interest in it. However, as in the previous times, Future Human Biology did not disclose how to treat this terminal disease, but only generally summarized the treatment process as muscle tissue repair and neuron repair. The International Medical Organization has no way to deal with the stinginess of Future Human Biology. After all, Future Human Group is a company, rather than a scholar. Even if it finds something, it is impossible to write a paper and publish it and see. In fact, it is not that Jiang Chen is stingy this time, but that he can't explain it clearly. The culture medium used in the medical cabin can accelerate the repair of necrotic cells under special electromagnetic effects. If the medical experts in the end of the world were asked to explain it, they might be able to explain it clearly, but for Jiang Chen, a layman, he could only use this general explanation to get by. Anyway, the treatment process is simple enough. 2 nurses will put the person in, and remember to change the culture medium regularly. If you have to say it, the operation is almost the same as washing machines. Shortly after the news of Hawking's joining the new nationality spread, countries also made subtle adjustments in their policies towards the moon. First of all, the United States, as the first and only country to send living people to the moon, was preempted by starring trade to establish a colony on the moon, which obviously made them feel unhappy. After many rounds of discussions, NASA finally persuaded Congress and got a budget of tens of billions of dollars. The White House announced that the Apollo program would be restarted and NASA would join SpaceX to re-explore the moon. It is reported that many high-tech companies including Google will also participate in it and share this national project with a budget of tens of billions of dollars. The European Space Agency is not far behind, announcing that it will hold a meeting in Darmstadt, Germany to discuss the formulation of moon landing plan as soon as possible. However, on the issue of who will pay for it, Countries have not yet reached a consensus. Although the European Space Agency is not linked to the European Union, it is obvious that the United Kingdom has been quite indifferent to this project after Brexit. Without the rich brother of Britain, it is difficult for France and Germany to squeeze out tens of billions of euros to invest in space projects. The director of the European Space Agency called on private enterprises to invest in the project, but whether anyone will invest is still unknown in the case of unclear business prospects. Next is China. The success of the changed series of rockets also makes it quite confident in the field of moon landing. Shortly after the European Space Agency held a meeting, the mysterious relevant department announced a new space white paper, incorporating the manned moon landing plan into the national space strategy, and it is expected to launch the first manned moon landing spacecraft in 2030. As for Russia, due to insufficient funds and other reasons, there is no statement for the time being. However, the Kremlin said that if conditions permit, it will change the existing space plan and include moon landing in Russia's space activities. Jiang Chen did not feel threatened by the countries that were stimulated. Even with the technology of starring trade, he spent a lot of money on it to get to this point. Perhaps the United States is the second country with the greatest hope of colonizing the moon, but by that time, the moon will probably be full of colonies and mines of the interstellar trade. Even if they want to colonize, will there be a place for them to settle down? Chapter 861 Gambling Agreement. As Jiang Chen expected, Natasha found him again after he got home from get off work one day. The Kremlin hopes that you can fulfill the original contract in advance. As compensation, we are willing to buy 5 RM-320 rocket engines at twice the price. When Starring Trade contracted the supply mission of the International Space Station from Russia, Jiang Chen reached an agreement with the Russian side to sell the RM-320 rocket engines used by Starring 1 to Russia at a reasonable price after several years. Jiang Chen originally planned to wait for more than 10 years to fulfill this agreement, but seeing that countries around the world were preparing for the moon landing plan, Russia was obviously unable to sit still. With a tight budget, they obviously couldn't afford to independently develop more advanced rocket engines, so naturally, the Kremlin set its sights on Jiang Chen. The RM-320 engine has been eliminated by Starring Trade. Although it marked the top level of space rockets before the end of the World War, it was also the result of a nearly 50-year gap in the development of space rockets. After the space elevator was developed, no one developed the troublesome and high-cost rocket engines anymore, and instead focused all their efforts on missiles and outer spacecraft engines. But this does not mean that it is technically impossible. After integrating some pre-war technology, the technicians of the end of the world made improvements on the RM-320 rocket engine and developed the more advanced RM-400. This is also the engine used by the Starring 4 rocket used for lunar colonization. From this perspective, there is no problem in selling the RM-320 engine to Russia, but considering strategic needs, Jiang Chen hopes that Russia will focus on Eastern Europe rather than the gradually heating up space race. So, after sorting out his thoughts, Jiang Chen spread his hands and replied to Natasha, "Anyway, there are only 2 years left until 2020, can't you wait? Time waits for no one, and technology will be eliminated. In today's international environment, who knows whether your RM-320 will still be the world's leading level by 2020? Natasha rolled her eyes and said. Hearing this rhetorical question, Jiang Chen smiled immediately. Let alone 2 years, even if SpaceX is given another 10 years, their Falcon rocket will not be able to use an engine more advanced than the RM-320. How about this? I promise that by the end of 2020, the performance of the RM-320 will still be at the forefront of the world. What if it doesn't? Natasha raised the corner of her mouth. Then I won't sell it and give it to you for free. Jiang Chen smiled confidently. Natasha thought for a long time before nodding. In this case, there should be no problem. Then I will reply to the Kremlin like this. Wait a minute. Natasha, who was about to get up, sat back down and looked at Jiang Chen and asked, anything else? Since it's a bet, there must be a prize, whether you win or lose. Jiang Chen smiled. If I win, and there is still no rocket engine that can surpass the performance of the RM320 by the end of 2020, what are you going to pay? Hearing Jiang Chen's words, Natasha pursed her red lips slightly, and her long legs with beautiful curves were lifted on her knees. Oh. Then what do you want? Jiang Chen smiled and put forward his proposal. Natasha left Jiang Chen's villa with the gambling contract. Although it was already 8 o'clock in the evening, the embassy was not closed. To be honest, with her achievements in helping Russia to cooperate with the Future Group, Natasha was more than qualified to be an ambassador. However, for some reason, she seemed to have no intention of being promoted. At noon the next day, the 4 new Guardian-class frigates ordered by Xinhua trade to Russia were successfully delivered. This military sales order worth $500 million will be paid to the Russian side in the form of New Zealand dollars. Due to the amazing success of the lunar colonization plan and the victory of the Moro War, the New Zealand dollar is showing a trend of continued strengthening in the foreign exchange market, and the exchange rate against the US dollar has now risen to 1:1.2. Although the rise in the exchange rate is not good for exports, many industries of the Future Group are unique and there is no cost competition. In addition, the increase in the exchange rate will mean that the import price of New Zealand will be cheaper, which will help New Zealand companies to invest overseas and expand their economic influence internationally. These 4 Guardian-class frigates will be sent to Coconut Island, where they will be equipped with Type 50 Joules electromagnetic guns by engineering robots. Together with the 2 ships and 2 submarines purchased from Russia, the starring navy already has 6 frigates, which is more than enough to form an offensive naval formation with mobility and firepower as the main features. In addition, the shipyard of future military industry has been built on Anger Island, and the order for the first destroyer has been placed. Soon, Starring Trade will equip itself with warships, produced in the new country, and use its own strong ships and powerful guns to guard its own country. After the warship handover ceremony, Jiang Chen returned to Koro Island. Seeing that it was still early, he went to the future building. After Xia Xiai reported to him about her recent work, Ivan called again. After opening the touchscreen and answering the call, Jiang Chen asked, "What's the matter?" "It's about Madagascar," Ivan answered. "At present, the government forces of Madagascar have besieged the Arrowhead Company and the rebels in the Bizarre area in the south of the island with the assistance of the Foreign Legion we sent. President Bernard called us half an hour ago, hoping that we would cooperate with the government forces to launch a final general offensive against the besieged rebels." At this point, Ivan stopped talking and waited for Jiang Chen's instructions. Jiang Chen's index finger tapped the table lightly, and he fell into deep thought. As early as when the soldiers of Starring Trade landed on Madagascar Island, the outcome of this war had already been doomed. No matter how the former President Rajona and Arrowhead Company struggled, he could not escape this demise. However, Jiang Chen did not let the Foreign Legion that landed immediately eliminate the other party, but instead let the war drag out as long as possible by letting the water out of the command without leaving any trace. Jiang Chen's approach is exactly the same as that of the Moroccan War of Independence. Only when Madagascar owes enough money can their government be more obedient. Rather than letting Starring Trade forcibly intervene in this island, he hopes to be welcomed as the savior. What's more, dragging this war on can also consume the manpower of the Freemasons. However, the Jews seem to have given up the Arrow Company as a chess piece. They had been sending more mercenaries to Madagascar, but now they are even cautious about the delivery of supplies. The turmoil in Eastern Europe has left them no time to take care of this southernmost island in Africa. Obviously, in the eyes of the Freemasons, the threat from Russia is greater than that of the multinational corporation Future Group. Send our Aurora 20 over and send them on their way. After pondering for a while, Jiang Chen said, "Yes." Ivan answered neatly and ended the call. Chapter 862. It started then. On October 21st, Aurora 20 arrived in Madagascar and launched a 24-hour airstrike against the rebels entrenched in the Bizarre area. The next morning, with the cooperation of the Starring Trade Foreign Legion, 5,000 Madagascar government soldiers launched the final general offensive against the rebels supporting former President Rajona. The outcome of the war was no surprise. A total of more than 3,000 rebel soldiers and mercenaries from Europe, 571 of whom were killed, 81 of whom were missing, and the rest of the wounded surrendered. In a bunker, the soldiers of the Foreign Legion captured former President Rajona. Also captured was Daira, the current president and chief instructor of Arrow Company. After consultation with the Madagascar government, Daira was secretly extradited to the new country, while Rajona was handed over to the Madagascar military court. On the night the war ended, Madagascar President Bernard gave a speech to the nation, announcing that with the help of starring trade, the months-long civil war had come to an end. All the assets of Arrowhead Company in Madagascar will be confiscated, and former President Rajona will be sentenced to death and executed at the end of the month. After the surrender of the rebels, France proposed that Madagascar should repatriate the captured European citizens. However, under Jiang Chen's instruction, Bernard rejected this proposal, saying that human rights are absolutely not a reason to defy the law. Europeans who participate in the rebels for any purpose will face charges of murder and war crimes. Only those who are found innocent can be released from prison. Having said that, Madagascar obviously does not intend to release anyone. And Jiang Chen's purpose in doing so is to put pressure on European governments and politicians under the control of the Freemasons through these prisoners of war. After being escorted to the new country, Daira, the president of Arrowhead Company, was immediately secretly taken to the underground of the Crescent Island military base, and Jiang Chen went to visit him in person. In the small black room like a prison, the haggard white man sat on a chair, still wearing the suit he wore when he was arrested, with handcuffs on his hands. There was a golden ring on the table, and the number 30 was painted on the gold engraved pattern. In Freemasonry, the highest level is 33 degrees, and 30 degrees can be regarded as a high-level Freemason. Jiang Chen sat opposite the glass window, looked at him, and said with a smile, "It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Radiaya. I believe you must be familiar with my face. I heard that you have a bad habit when making plans. You like to nail the mission target's headshot on the map with a dagger." Daira smiled dejectedly. "Just shoot me. Why waste time talking to a dead man?" If he had just been caught by the government forces of Madagascar, he still had a few hopes of survival. When he learned that he would be extradited to Singapore, he basically had no hope of survival. "We have a lot to talk about. Let's start from 2 years ago." After a pause, Jiang Chen said with a smile, "Do you remember your first kidnapping of me?" Earlier, the Philippines had planned a kidnapping operation against Jiang Chen himself, and the company hired was the Arrowhead Military Company. Nearly a dozen police officers died in the operation, and Asia was also injured. It was at that time that Jiang Chen thought about setting up an intelligence organization. Daira did not speak, but just looked at Jiang Chen in silence. Thinking carefully, it seems that during the period of internal testing of the Phantom helmet, an unknown armed force infiltrated the training facility, but it was discovered by our people. Jiang Chen smiled and looked at Daira. "I'm curious, when did you start targeting me?" "You mean the Freemasons?" Daira grinned. "Yes." Jiang Chen nodded. "Why should I tell you?" Daira sneered uncooperatively. "Just because I can let you live." Jiang Chen leaned back in his chair, crossed his fingers in front of him, and looked into his eyes with a smile. "I can also let you die." Daira's Adam's apple moved, but his eyes did not waver. "I know what you are worried about. If you confess to me, your family in Europe may meet with misfortune." At this point, Jiang Chen sat up from his chair, moved closer to the glass partition, lowered his voice, and said meaningfully, "But I don't know if you have ever thought about it. Since the Freemasons can make your family meet with misfortune, then I can't." Jiang Chen didn't intend to use his family as a threat, but now this Daira is likely to become a breakthrough in overthrowing the Freemasons, so he did not use a simple and crude truth serum, but planned to persuade him and win him over to his side. As he said this, Jiang Chen gestured to the bodyguard next to him, and a photo was placed on the table between the two of them. "This is your wife and your 2 daughters. They are beautiful, aren't they?" When he saw the photo, Daira's eyes suddenly turned red, and the shackles on the armrests shook. He stared at Jiang Chen intently, and squeezed out a few words from between his teeth. "You. The devil. I know what you want to say." Jiang Chen's expression was calm, and he spoke before him. But you are the only ones who are not qualified to say this to me. To use an old Chinese saying, there is no grudge between you and us. Why do you always bite my ass and won't let go? At this point, Jiang Chen was also a little angry. Since the Antarctic operation, the Freemasons have been acting recklessly towards him and his group. As he said, there was no connection between the two parties, but the Freemasons kept chasing him like a fly. Golden apple. Go to hell. Do you really think that thing can communicate the future? When he heard Jiang Chen's question, Dara relaxed his whole body and laughed instead, and said in a slightly relaxed tone, "You asked me before, when did we start to target you, right?" "Yes," Jiang Chen answered. Future Man 1.0. Dara threw out a name that surprised Jiang Chen, grinning. "When you proposed the concept of artificial intelligence, we noticed your company and you as the chairman." Seeing Jiang Chen didn't say anything, Dara raised his eyebrows. "Surprised?" "Indeed, I was surprised." Jiang Chen nodded. "I thought you noticed us from the coup in the Panu Islands, but I didn't expect that you had already targeted me at that time. But you haven't answered me yet. The reason why you targeted me, is it just because of the golden apple?" In addition to being surprised, Jiang Chen was also thinking secretly in his heart. He even knew this kind of information. It seems that his status in the Freemasonry should not be low. "At first it wasn't because of the golden apple. We just thought you were worth investing in, but later your series of actions made us suspect that the golden apple was on you." At this point, Dara paused, chuckled. "I didn't expect that we guessed right. It really was on you." However, what Jiang Chen wanted to say was that his current achievements were not really because of the golden apple. "The gatekeeper will take care of you. I've been waiting for him for a long time." Jiang Chen looked at his watch and shrugged, "but there's still no sign of him." "It won't be long, believe me." Dara laughed unnaturally and cast his eyes on Jiang Chen's watch. "It seems to be time." "Time?" Jiang Chen frowned slightly. At this moment, Jiang Chen saw a streak of blood overflowing from the corner of Dara's mouth and dripping onto his pants. "I don't know when." His raised pupils were filled with shocking bloodshot. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 863. Something more valuable. Seeing this, the bodyguard standing beside Jiang Chen suddenly stepped forward and kicked the door of the interrogation room, rushed in and carried Dara out. However, when the military doctor arrived, he had already stopped beating his heart. "Died of heart failure. We found drugs containing propafenone, metoprolol tartrate and other ingredients in his residence in Madagascar." According to the autopsy report, he had stopped taking the drugs for half a month. The next day at noon, in the study of the villa, Aisha reported to Jiang Chen about Dara's death. "Is that so? It's really a pity." Jiang Chen sighed. Originally, Jiang Chen also hoped to develop Radia into a downline of starring trade, monitor him with a slave chip, and release him back to Europe in the form of interest exchange without a trace, and then collect relevant information about the Freemasonry through him. It would be best to find out where Carmen is, or find a few members of the 33rd degree. At this moment, Aisha interrupted his thoughts softly. "Do you want to do it?" A photo gently floated down on the table. The blonde woman in the photo was smiling brightly, and there were her two daughters. This photo was taken in Munich, Germany. They were Adia's wife and daughter, and they were also the bargaining chips that Jiang Chen used to threaten him. After pondering for a moment, Jiang Chen sighed and shook his head. "No need, the person is already dead." Aisha nodded, smiled, nodded and said softly, "Yeah." Good news came from the lunar colony. The mining station deployed on the moon successfully extracted 100 g of helium-3 from the collected lunar soil, and the cost was only 11,000 New Zealand dollars in currency. If you want to intuitively feel how low this cost is, just refer to tritium, which is also a usable material for nuclear fusion. As a nuclear material that can be collected from the Earth, the price of tritium is more than tens of thousands of dollars per gram, and it is mainly produced in the United States. The amount of tritium approved by the United States to export to the world each year is only about 1 kilogram. In addition to industry and experiments, its main use is to make neutron bombs. Helium-3 does not produce neutrons during the fusion process, but only produces non-radioactive protons, which will not produce radiation that makes people shudder. It can be said to be a very clean energy. From this perspective, the price of helium-3 will only be more expensive than tritium, and it will be much more expensive. Once the energy problem is solved, many things can be solved easily. When the space elevator is built, and the technology of ultra-long distance wireless power transmission is taken out, the new round of energy revolution will be led by the future group, allowing the whole world to truly enter the electrical age. Putting aside the moon in advance, after the civil war in Madagascar ended, President Bernard's first stop on a diplomatic visit, after handling domestic affairs, was Singapore. After the meeting with Singapore President Zhang Yaping, the Black President went to Jiang Chen's villa in a low-key manner, and visited the behind-the-scenes controller of this country. With a whole drone attack group acting as security, Jiang Chen's villa is definitely one of the safest places in the world. Leaving the accompanying bodyguard outside the door, Bernard walked into the villa with his assistant. After seeing Jiang Chen, he immediately extended his hand with a smile. "Hello, Mr. Jiang Chen. On behalf of the entire people of Madagascar, I pay you the highest respect." "You're flattered." Jiang Chen smiled and shook his outstretched hand. "Welcome to my humble home, Mr. President." It was still working hours, and only Jiang Chen and Aisha were in the villa. After inviting Bernard to take a seat, Jiang Chen sat opposite him. Aisha made a cup of black tea for each of them, and then quietly left the living room. Without saying many polite words, Bernard went straight to the point, and explained the purpose of his visit. "The Rajona rebels have been wiped out. When are you going to withdraw from Madagascar?" Seeing Bernard's cautious look, Jiang Chen couldn't help but smile and took a sip of the black tea. "Any time is fine, depending on when you plan to end the employment." Seeing Jiang Chen so easy to talk to, Bernard and his assistant breathed a sigh of relief. At present, the total number of foreign legionaries of starring trade on the island of Madagascar has exceeded 3,000, and there are also dozens of armored vehicles and other military vehicles besides tanks. It is no exaggeration to say that the combat effectiveness of this 3,000-man army has completely surpassed that of the government forces of Madagascar. How can the president feel at ease with such a powder keg in the country? Before coming here, Bernard was still thinking about how to convince Jiang Chen if he did not intend to withdraw his troops from Madagascar. But now it seems that these concerns seem to be unnecessary. But is this really the case? What he did not notice was that Jiang Chen's mouth curled up in an undetectable smile. "Well, before we withdraw our troops, let's settle your debts first." "Debt?" Bernard said in a daze. "Yes." Jiang Chen nodded. At this time, Aisha, who had left the living room earlier, had already taken a document from the study for him and handed it to him. After a quick glance at the cover of the document, Jiang Chen smiled and rubbed Aisha's head. The latter squinted happily and left the living room again with satisfaction. The hiring fee of starring trade, the arms previously delivered to your army, and the secret agreement signed by Sangweni, who was unfortunately assassinated, on behalf of your party. All the expenses are on this. You can take a look first. Whether it is to reorganize the army, that looks like a mob, or to run for president, the funds consumed are not a small amount. What's more, they had no choice at the time. Even if Jiang Chen's side almost raised the price, they could only pinch their noses and accept it. However, when seeing the bill of $11 billion, Bernard's brows still twitched fiercely. $11 billion. Madagascar's annual GDP is only about 10 billion. How can it possibly come up with so much money? Rather, he wanted to borrow some money from the future bank due to the tight finances. This agreement, the one who signed it was Sangweni. If you have any doubts about it, you can check the fingerprints on it, Jiang Chen said with a smile. We can't come up with so much money at all, Bernard said with difficulty. However, he couldn't say that he would not pay back the money. Debt default will immediately reduce the already deteriorating investment environment to a freezing point. If a country can easily cancel its debts, it will be completely isolated by international capital. Bernard couldn't help but curse Sanguini, who had been assassinated, in his heart, but cursing a dead person can't solve the problem of the living. I didn't ask you to pay back the money immediately. Jiang Chen looked at Bernard, who was speechless, with a smile, and then said, besides, compared to getting a banknote, I'm more interested in getting something more valuable from you. Chapter 864 Pioneers. With a complicated expression, Bernard and his assistant left Jiang Chen's villa. Madagascar had just gotten rid of Arrowhead Company and then welcomed Starring Trade. He didn't know what this meant, nor did he know whether it was a blessing or a curse for his country. All he could do was accept it. Sanguini's assassination was quite sudden, and the former party prime minister and president did not leave him any useful information. The position of vice president is like a mascot. If it weren't for the sudden death of the president, he would never have had the opportunity to take this position. Madagascar's post-war recovery needs the help of Future Group. Even if he doesn't want private armed forces to continue to proliferate in the country, he can only compromise on this issue. According to the agreement he reached with Jiang Chen, Future Bank will provide a loan of 2 billion New Zealand dollars to the Madagascar government. At the same time, in addition to the minerals that Sanguini promised to Future Group, Future Mining will also have the priority mining rights of its domestic minerals. In addition, Starring Trade will retain 5 military bases with a scale of less than 200 people in Madagascar and can legally employ local people to join the Foreign Legion. Bernard pinched his eyebrows painfully after getting on the plane back to Madagascar. He is now worrying about how to convince the people in his country to acquiesce to the Starring Trade to keep its military base in Madagascar. Fortunately, Future Group promised to lend a hand in public opinion propaganda, so the trouble should not be too big. In the basement of Future Building, in Amos's laboratory, under the guidance of the blonde little lolly, Jiang Chen met Dr. Amos, who was testing the robot in the laboratory. Amos was sitting on a chair, wearing a modified phantom helmet on his head, and opposite him was a water tank of about 100 square meters separated by a graphene partition. A robot with the same structure as a human body floated in the water tank, and through the bubble strings sprayed from the joints, it surrounded a satellite floating in the center, and performed various difficult movements. The last time he met Amos, Jiang Chen asked him to develop a neural access robot specifically for the space environment, to replace astronauts in the vacuum environment to perform dangerous operations. I didn't expect him to progress so fast. He had produced a prototype in less than 3 months. The robot in the water tank looked over. After noticing that Jiang Chen had arrived, the floating robot quickly stopped moving. After about 2 or 3 seconds, Amos, who was sitting on the chair, released the neural bridge state with the robot, and took off his helmet. Putting the helmet aside, Amos reached out and rubbed his daughter's hair, letting her go play first, then looked at Jiang Chen and grinned. How do you feel? Very good. Jiang Chen couldn't help but praise. If there are these robots, the construction speed of the space elevator will undoubtedly be much faster. People will get tired and need to eat, drink, defecate and urinate, but machines only need to be charged. Placing a floating charging station next to the construction site in outer space will, without exaggeration, more than double the construction speed. For mass production, the unit price of each machine is between 1 million and 1.5 million New Zealand dollars, which is not much more expensive than a spacesuit. With a little training, anyone can use this interesting tool, Amos said with a smile. Can I try it? Jiang Chen asked eagerly, looking at the robot in the water tank. Of course. Amos stood up from his chair and made a gesture of invitation to the helmet on the table. Jiang Chen walked forward, picked up the helmet, and put it on his head. The connection password is 1452, and the startup password only needs to say connect or start. A holographic operation interface will be projected on your retina. Just focus your eyes on the option and wait for the 3-second reading bar to complete. Then you can perform special function operations. After listening to Dr. Amos's explanation, Jiang Chen adjusted his sitting position to a comfortable position, cleared his throat, and said in a deep voice, connect. Just like when the Phantom helmet was started, it was not connected to the virtual reality network, but switched to the robot's field of view. Jiang Chen looked at the mechanical arm through his electronic eyes, and then looked around, feeling uncontrollable excitement. Through the holographic interface in his field of vision, Jiang Chen could see his heart rate, as well as the secretion of hormones such as insulin, adrenal glands, and antidiuretic hormone, to determine whether his original body was experiencing physiological conditions such as hunger and urgency. The button in the upper right corner was a shutdown option. After locking his eyes on it and reading the bar for 3 seconds, he could exit this neural bridge mode. Compared with the previous need to remove the bridge with the help of others, this design is undoubtedly much more user-friendly. Jiang Chen opened his mouth and was about to ask how to control the jet hole at the joint, but no sound came out. Instead, what he wanted to say was read into text and sent to the computer outside the water tank. This is one of the difficulties of neural bridge technology. Amos helplessly spread his hands and explained to Jiang Chen, "It's like I can install a pair of wings on your back, but if you don't understand how to use the wings, then it can only be used as a decoration and cannot play its original role." What does this mean? Jiang Chen fluttered his arms and legs in the water tank, trying to imagine that there was a jet hole at his joint, but he couldn't drive it to shoot out air. Literally, Amos sighed, the core of controlling this mechanical body is still your brain. But the parts that don't exist in your original body, it's impossible for your brain to understand the current situation without a certain amount of training. Jiang Chen gave up trying, focused his eyes on the exit option, and ended the neural bridge state. He took off the helmet on his head and put it aside, rubbed his sore brain, and asked Amos casually, "Okay, let me ask you, how long did it take you to be able to control this robot freely?" "About 2 weeks. After all, my brain is a little stronger than that of an ordinary person." Amos chuckled without any modesty and put away his helmet. "By the way, it's the first time to use this kind of equipment, and it will put a lot of pressure on your brain. If you feel very tired now, I suggest you go home and have a good sleep." After referring to Jiang Chen's opinion, this neural bridge robot used for space activities was finally named Pioneer and was produced by Future Heavy Industry. At the same time, the Space Launch Center will send 100 people to the Astronaut Training Center for training to familiarize themselves with this epoch-making tool. After returning to the office and arranging the production matters, Jiang Chen yawned and left work early. Aisha was still in charge of driving and sat in the co-pilot seat. Jiang Chen was about to take a nap, but a phone call disturbed his sleep. Chapter 865. Invitation from Silicon Valley. Since the major technological breakthrough of graphene materials, all kinds of mobile phones, whether advanced or not, have replaced the screen with graphene, and the chips have gradually transitioned from silicon-based chips to graphene chips. It was at this time that people fully realized how profitable the Future Group, which led this materials revolution, was. 80% of the world's graphene materials are supplied from the Singapore Malaysia Special Zone and the graphene factory built by the Future Group. Especially for high-strength graphene and semiconductor graphene materials, the Future Group, which has mastered the core technology, has almost monopolized the entire supply market and has undisputed pricing power. Even the competitors of Future Technology, such as Apple and Samsung, electronic equipment manufacturers, have to admit the fact that they are not as good as others and have adopted the graphene screens and Deep Blue M1 chips produced by Future Heavy Industry. Although Intel also developed graphene chips after obtaining technical authorization from the Future Group, which saved the chattering stock price, anyone with a discerning eye can see the technological gap between this hastily completed semi-finished product and Deep Blue M1. That is why, if Europe's comprehensive embargo on Future Group is the most unacceptable loss, it is probably the electronics industry. Although the EU seems to have selectively let go of graphene and has not imposed any punishment on the graphene materials exported by Future Group to Europe, Future Group has unilaterally announced that it will stop supplying graphene to European companies. This is almost a heavy punch to the stomach of supercomputing centers in Switzerland and other countries, as well as European semiconductor chip companies that are already lagging behind Silicon Valley. If they want to get Future chips, they must get them at a relatively high price through offshore distributors registered in Sweden, Norway, the United Kingdom and other countries. It is no exaggeration to say that as graphene materials become more and more popular, Future Group's dominance over the global high-tech industry will become more and more significant. The reason why the United States has not taken action against Future Group again is that the WASP consortium and Jiang Chen have formed an alliance of interests, and on the other hand, it is worried that the fluctuation of graphene prices may impact Silicon Valley. 80% of the world's graphene materials come from Future Group, and 60% of Future Group's graphene materials are sold to Silicon Valley. It would be good for no one to break up hastily. If Intel can replace Future Group and solve the technical problems of graphene semiconductors and high-strength graphene materials, the US Department of Commerce would have already started discussing anti-dumping and countervailing investigations based on its nature. The call was from Sun Jiao. Jiang Chen, who had just left the company, immediately turned back. When Jiang Chen pushed open the door of the office and walked in, Sun Jiao put down the pen in her hand, pushed her glasses, and said in an apologetic tone, "Sorry, I didn't know you were off work. Do you want something to drink? I'll make it for you. Boiled water, let's have a cup of coffee. Mocha is fine." Jiang Chen originally planned to ask for a glass of boiled water, but he yawned in the middle of his words, so he changed his mind and asked for coffee. Sun Jiao nodded, stood up and walked to the coffee machine in the office, brewed a cup of fragrant mocha for Jiang Chen and herself, then walked to the sofa in front of the desk and sat down, placing the cup on the coffee table. "Thank you." Putting the coffee to his lips and smelling the fragrance of the Chinese tune, Jiang Chen immediately felt that his sleepiness had dissipated a lot. "You're welcome. What time did you go to bed last night? Why do you feel so sleepy?" Sun Jiao lifted the hair by her ears and asked Jiang Chen with concern. "Well, maybe I went to bed a little late." Because it was too troublesome to explain, Jiang Chen just followed her words. While speaking, Jiang Chen yawned again. For some reason, when she heard Jiang Chen say that he went to bed a little late, Sun Jiao's face suddenly turned red, and she glared at Jiang Chen fiercely. "Pay attention. Pay attention. Pay attention?" Jiang Chen raised his eyebrows and asked in confusion. "Take care of your body, or be moderate." After coughing softly, Sun Jiao looked aside and said the words that were squeezed in her throat. Seeing her look, Jiang Chen couldn't help but smile. This insincere look is really never boring, no matter how many times you see it. "Why are you looking at me?" Sun Jiao glared at Jiang Chen, stood up, and walked towards the desk. "It's not like she'll lose a piece of flesh," Jiang Chen complained in his heart. After returning with a stack of documents, Sun Jiao threw the documents on the coffee table and sat back on the sofa. From her serious expression, it can be seen that she has switched back to work mode. Taking the documents on the coffee table and glancing at them, Jiang Chen gradually restrained his playful look, drove away the sleepiness in his heart, and put on a serious attitude. "Silicon Valley High-Tech Innovation and Entrepreneurship Summit?" "Yes," Sun Jiao nodded, abbreviated as High-Tech Innovation and Entrepreneurship Summit. It is the largest and highest level high-tech event in the Silicon Valley area of the United States, and it is also an international professional conference in the field of high technology. "We have received an invitation from the United States. What do you think?" Jiang Chen picked up the document at hand and glanced through it. This high-tech innovation conference has a great background. Although the organizers and participants were all American companies at the beginning, the influence of the subsequent sessions gradually radiated to the Asian region. The fields covered include mobile internet, cloud technology, big data, games, smart hardware, home, Internet of Things, robots and wearable devices, etc., education, medical care and low-carbon environmental protection, representing the core areas of Silicon Valley's technological frontier. The conference is held every autumn, and each time it is held, it attracts a large number of high-tech leaders from China, the United States and the Asia-Pacific region to participate. Among them are 1,500 plus high-tech companies from China, the United States and other countries, 1,000 plus executives of the world's top 500 companies, and 20,000 plus professionals. At the same time, there will be more than 120 heavyweight media from different parts of the world to follow up and report on the whole process. The 16th session was held in Shangjing City, and this time it was held at the Santa Clara Convention Center in Silicon Valley. The United States invited Future Group to participate in the conference at this time, which is undoubtedly sending a signal of easing As for whether it will be a hangman banquet, there is no need to worry about this. As long as the submarine missile silo remains there, no matter how much the FBI and CIA hate him, they dare not let him have an accident on American soil. The situation in Manila has proved that in the 21st century, there is a force that is more effective and terrifying than nuclear weapons in destroying civilization. Its name is electromagnetic pulse, EMP. At this moment, Jiang Chen is thinking more about what benefits this visit can bring to him. The organizers are very much looking forward to our arrival. The US Department of Commerce also hopes that we will cooperate more closely with high-tech companies in Silicon Valley on graphene and artificial intelligence technology. In addition, each company will also showcase its technological achievements at the summit and explore the possibility of commercial cooperation and investment. At present, we have a high market share in the field of graphene, but the total volume of the graphene market is still seriously lower than its valuation. Through this summit, we can promote our products to more companies. While Jiang Chen was thinking, Sun Jiao further explained the significance of this summit. Nodding, Jiang Chen snapped the file shut and put it back on the table. I'll go back and prepare. The summit will be held on October 31st, right? It would be better to go there a few days in advance. After hearing Jiang Chen's words, Sun Jiao was stunned. Wait, you want to go in person? What else? Jiang Chen said with a smile. Chapter 866 Long Distance Wireless Power Transmission. Sun Jiao originally planned to attend the Silicon Valley High-Tech Innovation Conference by herself. As a senior executive of Future Group, she can indeed represent Future Group to a certain extent. The reason for this consideration is mainly because of her concern for Jiang Chen's safety. Jiang Chen persuaded Sun Jiao to go there in person. Speaking of which, his business has spread across most of the United States, but he has never been there in person. In addition, California, where Silicon Valley is located, is just next to Nevada. Taking this opportunity, he also wanted to visit the mysterious Area 51 in person, to see what the Americans are researching inside. Before flying to Los Angeles, good news came from the end of the world. The long-distance power transmission equipment that Jiang Chen had been asking the White Whale Haiti Research Station to search for finally had a clue. Wu Yu, who lived in the 6th block, conveyed the news to Chunan, who then fed it back to the Fishbone base. When Sun Jiao told Jiang Chen the good news, Jiang Chen immediately returned to the end of the world and went to the 6th block to find Wu Yu. In front of the warehouse in the 6th block, the sentry wearing an exoskeleton stood at attention and saluted, then opened the iron door for Jiang Chen. The dry air hit Jiang Chen's face, and he walked into the bright warehouse. He soon saw Wu Yu standing on a platform, and the researchers of Camp 27 who were busy around the platform. We meet again, Mr. Marshall. Wu Yu smiled and came forward, stretched out his hand and shook Jiang Chen tightly. Long time no see, Jiang Chen smiled and let go of his hand. I didn't expect that after so long. You are still sitting in the ambassador's position. Surprised? Wu Yu spread his hands and said with a smile. No, I'm just curious why you didn't get promoted. Let's not talk about this. Where are the things? Jiang Chen looked around and didn't see what he expected in the warehouse. Hearing this, Wu Yu smiled and stamped his feet. It's right under our feet. Slightly stunned, Jiang Chen looked down. Looking closely, this hexagonal platform is really special. On the dark black shell, you can see small scaly bumps, about the size of a thumb, neatly arranged in a net, covering the hexagonal platform. However, Jiang Chen never thought that this hexagonal platform, which covers an area of 10,000 square meters, is actually part of a long-distance wireless power transmission device. How does this thing work? Can you show me? Jiang Chen stepped on the surface of the platform casually. Apart from feeling that the surface material was very soft, he didn't see anything special. This thing works in outer space and can't be used in the atmosphere. Wu Yu shook his head and pointed at the researchers from NAC. You might as well ask your subordinates about the specific working principle. I don't know much. Well, let's settle the bill first. When he talked about settling the bill, Wu Yu's face immediately smiled. Jiang Chen didn't waste time talking to him. He just tapped on his watch, pulled out the data cable, and connected it directly to his app, and then transferred 10,000 credit points to his account. Seeing that string of numbers, Wu Yu's smile widened. He bowed respectfully to Jiang Chen and then left the warehouse. 10,000 credit points, with a purchasing power equivalent to 100,000 subcrystals, was enough for the White Whale Research Station to purchase supplies for a whole month in the 6th block. If they were to cooperate with merchants, they would have to travel 4 times as far as Japan's Honshu Island to earn so much. Helping the NAC military government salvage the equipment in front of the station was a lucrative job for the people at the White Whale Research Station. After Wu Yu left, Jiang Chen found a researcher who was busy on a computer next to the platform and asked him how to use the device. Seeing the marshal asking him questions, the technician named Luo Yang was quite excited. He put down his work and took Jiang Chen straight to an instrument in the corner of the warehouse. On the iron box, that looked like a wardrobe, there was a transparent plexiglass tube about 1 meter long. This is a device that simulates the outer space environment and wireless power transmission. Electric energy is converted into a laser beam carrying energy at the A pole of the aurora, and then converted into electric energy at the B pole. Now the glass tube is evacuated to a state close to vacuum to prevent the power transmission laser from being lost in the form of heat energy. Luo Yang explained the technical connotations of the device to Jiang Chen in layman's terms, while reaching out to open the holographic screen and pressing the start button of the device. He tapped his finger on it several times and set the power transmission. One end of the glass tube began to light up, and the indicator marking the power level began to jump, and finally stopped at 21 kilowatts. In an instant, the blue laser filled the entire vacuum tube, like a flowing liquid, bright but not dazzling. At the same time, the indicator level opposite to the other pole of the vacuum tube also began to jump. When the surging laser stabilized, the level finally stopped at 20.997 kilowatts. Even considering the distance of only 1 meter, the power loss of 0.014% is quite amazing. Unlike traditional power transmission methods, under ideal conditions, this laser power transmission does not pass through the medium, so there is no so-called resistance and heat loss. As long as the medium on the optical path is as small as possible and the light beam is as concentrated as possible, the electric energy can be stably transmitted from one pole to the other across tens of thousands or even millions of kilometers with extremely low loss. By then, the helium-3 mined from the moon will not need to be transported to the Earth by spacecraft. It will be directly converted into electricity at the nuclear fusion power station on the moon, and then directly shot to the end of the space elevator in outer space in this laser power transmission method. After being converted into electricity, it will be transmitted to the ground power grid via superconductor lines. Because of the material of organic glass, we can observe the laser beam with the naked eye. Although it looks very gentle, it is also a kind of power loss. However, in the real universe, this beam is invisible. In other words, the blue strip beam can only be observed in areas close to the Earth, or when there happens to be a dust belt or a water molecule group passing by. While introducing it to Jiang Chen, Wu Yu turned off the device. If a spacecraft passes through this laser beam, wouldn't it be very dangerous? Jiang Chen suddenly thought of a very serious problem. Tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of MW of electricity converted into lasers. This is simply a moon-based laser turret. If a spacecraft or rocket passes through the middle of this light path, it will be directly roasted into molten iron. In addition, if this laser accidentally misses and pokes the Earth, Jiang Chen is really a little afraid that it will directly poke a hole in the atmosphere. This worry is unnecessary. Luo Yang smiled. Generally speaking, the light path will be marked on the spacecraft's navigator, and no spacecraft will fly over it, just like we won't have nothing better to do than carry a ladder and touch the high voltage wires. What if the laser goes astray? Jiang Chen asked. Chapter 867 Current Situation of the 6th Block. Jiang Chen always asked tricky and inexplicable questions, which made Luo Yang, a technician, very helpless. What if it hits the Earth? In his opinion, this is not a problem at all. No problem. The appetite of the atmosphere is much greater than we think. Luo Yang shrugged and replied, the wavelength of the laser is quite short, and the particles in the air will block it, scatter it around, and finally be absorbed by the ozone layer. Unlike the beam shot by the laser pistol, you can understand the power transmission laser as a beam with a shorter wavelength than ultraviolet light. This beam is more easily absorbed by the atmosphere, so the impact on the Earth's environment is quite weak. At this point, Luo Yang paused and said in a half-joking tone, "Take a step back, space elevators are usually built on the sea. Even if the light path of the power transmission laser has a small angle deviation, it is very likely to just poke into the sea, and it is almost impossible to shoot on land. Under the control of a quantum computer, it is almost impossible for the laser beam used for power transmission to deviate from this hexagonal platform of thousands of square meters." According to the data provided by Luo Yang, there will be only 4 failures in the Earth-Moon power transmission optical path from 2050 to 2150. 4 failures in 100 years is already a very low probability. Moreover, the economic losses caused by each failure are only the electricity lost in the atmosphere and the nuclear fusion cores consumed by ground facilities during large-scale power outages. After being explained by the technician, Jiang Chen walked around the long-distance power transmission equipment for several laps, and finally left the warehouse with satisfaction. In fact, before coming here, he thought that the long-distance power transmission in the 22nd century was the kind of power transmission equipment similar to the Wardenclyffe Tower plan proposed by Tesla. That is, build an electric tower similar to a radio tower, except that the radio it transmits is not used to transmit information, but to transmit energy. As long as you are on Earth, you don't need wires, you only need a thing similar to a radio, and you can access the power grid, no matter how far away you are. However, when he proposed this concept, he found that the technician was trying to hold back his smile, and explained to him that this was impossible. Moreover, Tesla also exists in the timeline of the apocalypse, but it is not the modern consortium that provides funds for the Wardenclyffe Tower. Limited by the current technological level, Tesla calculated his wireless power transmission system based on coil coupling. In his algorithm, the ground, water, air, and ionosphere do not absorb electromagnetic waves, so the power transmission efficiency will certainly be much higher than that of wires with resistance. However, in fact, this is impossible. To be honest, Tesla is an unreliable genius. Of course, I do not deny his contributions to alternating current and radio, as well as his Nobel Prize and many other contributions. It's just that many of the concepts he proposed are too, well, science fiction. Including his super weapon death ray, it was finally proved to be just a beam of charged particles, not because of God's jealousy of talents. However, this is also one of the reasons why he is highly respected by the civilians. After all, compared with old pedants, ordinary people generally prefer people who can brag. Just like conspiracy theories, there is always more market than news. But in other words, if his inventions were really that magical, the modern consortium would not give up investing in him. After leaving the warehouse, Jiang Chen did not return to the villa directly. Instead, he walked around the 6th block several times accompanied by the guards. It was almost the end of October, and the air could already feel the dryness and coldness of late autumn. The winter in the wasteland is much longer and colder than in the modern world. Even in the south, it will almost snow in Wanghai City in another month. Since the city center was captured, and the alien nests and zombie mother bodies were cleared, Wanghai City no longer has any threats from aliens and zombies. Although the walls surrounding the inner and outer circles of the 6th block are still preserved, compared with its original significance, the walls now exist only as a spiritual symbol. The survivors have built houses outside the walls, and those half-collapsed buildings have also been used. After a little repair, they have become the residences of some survivors' families or groups. Almost all the survivors in the entire Suzhou and Hangzhou province have moved to the 6th block, or the survivor settlement in Jia City, which is also under the management of NAC. Not counting colonies such as Hangcheng and Yuzhou, the total population of NAC has exceeded 300,000. Walking on the streets of the 6th district, it is much more crowded than a year ago. On the road leading to the market, you can often see vehicles carrying grain passing by. Merchants from afar will choose to do their last job before winter. pulling the cabbage produced in the Garden of Eden to the Fuzzhow area further south, and then spend the winter comfortably in the local survivor settlement with Asian crystals, and return to the 6th district in spring with local specialties. Because of the existence of NAC, Wanghai City has become a trade hub connecting the north and the south. I just don't know why. According to Chunan, there are fewer merchants from the north than in previous years. The military government sent a stalker corps to explore the Shangjing city area, but the scouts who went there have not returned yet. But there are only a few possible reasons. If it's not the weather, then it's that they encountered some difficult alien species, or a gang that rose up somewhere blocked the trade route. Walking from the industrial area to the market, Jiang Chen found with emotion that every time he came back, the place would change into a new look. In his memory, the robot ramen restaurant on the corner of the street was gone, replaced by a bar with flashing neon lights. The small vendors with sheds also disappeared completely, replaced by shops as respectable as those in the inner circle. The abundance of materials has led to economic prosperity. According to Linling, the second Garden of Eden is under construction. With the successful experience of the previous Garden of Eden, the construction speed of this new Garden of Eden will be much faster than the previous one. When the second Garden of Eden is completed, Mac will be able to be self-sufficient in food without considering exports. By then, Jiang Chen will almost be able to get rid of the miserable title of food porter. After all, he is now the chairman of a world-class company and a warlord who controls a region. It is really inconsistent with his identity to run to a secret warehouse every month, to grunt and move hundreds of tons of food. It is enough to add some vegetables produced from the seabed to the refrigerator of his villa every week, to show his style as a good family man. Whether in terms of taste or texture, the vegetables produced by Xin Hainan are deeply welcomed by women. Every time at the dinner table, Jiang Chen felt happy when he saw Sun Jiao and Lin Ling wolfing down their food, and Xiao Rao and Yao Yao taking small bites. After all the crises in Wanghai City were resolved, this was one of the main motivations for him to take a few days out of the week to return to the apocalypse. Chapter 868, The Dawn of Traveling Through Time. After leaving the 6th block by helicopter, Jiang Chen returned to the Fishbone base. He stopped by the community center and found Wang King to learn about the reserve of materials in the base. Then he found Han Jianhua to inquire about the deployment of the front line and whether there were any new actions in the United District. Finally, Jiang Chen went to the software development department that was developing a new game for a tour, then left the community center and returned to the villa. Yao Yao was still the chef for lunch. The little girl in an apron cooked a table full of her specialty dishes. Whether it was the tender roasted pig's trotters or the colorful Wachan fish, they all exuded an appetizing aroma. Linling, who was sitting at the table, had her eyes shining and had already grasped the chopsticks in her hands. Seeing that there were snacks to go with the wine, Jiang Chen took out 2 bottles of ice beer from the refrigerator. One bottle was for himself, and the other was for Xiao Rao. Sun Jiao's drinking habit was too bad, and she was very self-aware, and drank Coke as usual. As for the lovely Yao Yao, Jiang Chen prepared coconut milk from Koro Island for her, which is one of her favorite drinks. The family had lunch, and chatted about Penglai City, which Jiang Chen built in the present world. A city floating on the sea. It's totally unimaginable. Can we build one in the end times? Sun Jiao said enviously, while taking a sip of Coke. There were many cities on the sea before the war, but most of them sank. At the end, Yao Yao's tone was a little nostalgic. Yao Yao, who came from the pre-war period, was not unfamiliar with the concept of cities on the sea, but her current life rarely made her recall the time before the war. Linling, who was still eating, was the same. She even participated in the design of Penglai City. She just curled her lips and licked the soup at the corner of her mouth when Jiang Chen praised Penglai City. It is technically feasible, but there is no need for that. If there is a chance, I will definitely take you there to have a look, Jiang Chen said with a smile. That's great. Sun Jiao outside with some longing, holding her chin with one hand, and said in a dreamy voice, I just don't know when that day will come. There will be such a day, Jiang Chen promised. At this moment, Linling, who had been eating hard, moved her ears, as if she heard something. She suddenly raised her head tried to swallow the food in her mouth, looked at Jiang Chen and said, "By the way, there is something I almost forgot to tell you." "You have forgotten it. What is it?" Jiang Chen asked. Her eyebrows raised, her red and black eyes narrowed into a slit. Linling proudly puffed out her chest and dropped a heavy bomb on the dining table. "My research on how to carry life forms through time and space seems to have some clues." After lunch, no one touched the plates on the table. Not only Jiang Chen, but also Sun Jiao, Xiao Rao, and Yao squeezed into Linling's laboratory, staring at Linling who was debugging the instrument. "Don't look at me like that. I'll be nervous. I'll make it clear in advance that after all, it hasn't been tested yet. Theoretically, it should be feasible, but we'll have to try it to know what the truth is." Linling muttered in a low voice, tapping her fingers on the holographic screen and activating several instruments in the laboratory. "By the way, how big is your storage space?" Linling's question made Jiang Chen stunned. To be honest, he hadn't paid attention to this question for a long time. "It's already very big. Wait, let me take a look." As he said that, Jiang Chen closed his eyes and sank his consciousness into the spherical universe. This feeling was quite wonderful. Although it was pitch black, he could clearly feel the existence of every object in it and could use a pair of invisible hands to fiddle with its position. The boundary of the universe is an invisible wall composed purely of gravity. There is no matter behind the wall, and there is even no concept of space. It is very troublesome to measure the size of this space. Although he has absolute control over all the matter in the space, Jiang Chen cannot feel many perceptions of this space itself. Fortunately, with the help of the invisible hands, Jiang Chen controlled the things stored in the space through his consciousness and arranged them in a row like building blocks, like a crooked line passing through the center of the spherical universe. Jiang Chen's mouth curled up into a smug smile, but then his expression suddenly became awkward. How to measure without a ruler? After a while, Jiang Chen opened his eyes. The operation just now made him a little dizzy. It seems that using the invisible hands requires consuming the energy stored in the bracelet. Probably, the radius is 20 meters, or maybe 15 meters. Anyway, it's as big as a small house. Jiang Chen gestured with his hands and said ambiguously, "How big is a small house, idiot?" Linling complained, sighed, and came to a cylindrical instrument with a test tube filled with unknown liquid. There was a small opening in the center of the cylinder, just enough to accommodate a test tube. White mist swirled out of the small opening, and it seemed that the temperature inside should be quite low. "Cryogenic hibernation?" Sun Jiao tilted her head and asked. "Yes and no." Linling used a very ambiguous statement, inserted the test tube into the cylinder, then closed the open shell, reached out and knocked on the cylinder. "Throw this into your storage space. If it's correct, this should work." "Throw it all in?" "Yes, the whole thing." Linling nodded. The eyes of the women were all focused on Jiang Chen. Being stared at by so many eager eyes, Jiang Chen touched his nose embarrassedly and put his hand on the cylinder. In just a blink of an eye, the cylinder, which was about 1 person tall, disappeared in the room. Jiang Chen looked at Linling and asked, "That's it? Then what?" Linling pinched her chin and thought seriously, directly. "No, it's better to travel back to your side first, then travel back, and then spit out the storage space." As soon as Linling finished speaking, Jiang Chen disappeared in the room. 2 minutes later, he appeared in the laboratory again. He raised his hand, and the cylindrical machine reappeared in the laboratory. Yao blinked in confusion, still not understanding what this experiment was all about. Sun Jiao and Xiao Rao were the same, looking at Linling, Jiang Chen, and the cylinder in the middle of the laboratory in confusion. Ignoring Jiang Chen, after seeing the cylinder, Linling immediately stepped forward to open the device, took out the test tube that she had inserted into the device before, walked to a microscope with it, made a temporary slide, and observed it under the microscope. Within 2 seconds, Linling's face showed ecstasy. Success. Chapter 869. Winter comes earlier than previous years. The wind and frost were as sharp as a knife, carrying broken snow and ice flowers. The snow scattered all over the sky was like cotton wool, brushing against faces that had long been frozen numb and pressing down on the bag behind them bit by bit. There was still the last 50 kilometers to the outpost in Hanzhong, and there was no time for them to rest before arriving. The sentries wearing cold-proof clothes walked beside the queue, scanning the white wilderness with vigilant eyes and gun muzzles. The machine gunner sitting on the top of the armored vehicle exhaled white mist and passed the time by the machine gun. They were an army belonging to the Northern United District. Standing behind them were the people of the Northern United District, and they were also the last group of people to move from Lanzhou to Hanzhong. Unlike Guanghe City, the winter here came more than a month earlier. It was not only because of the latitude, but more because of the radioactive cloud that was condensed in the air. The radioactive dust piled up like a quilt, but their function was not to keep warm, but to reflect sunlight back into space. This year was very abnormal. Even for the northwest region, this year's winter came much earlier than in previous years. However, for the wasteland, abnormality itself is a normal state. People may feel desperate, but they will never be surprised. After harvesting the last batch of mutant fruits, this group of people had to brave the heavy snow and embark on a journey to Hanzhong. Perhaps many people will die here, but if they don't leave, more people may die. Unlike Guanghe City, there are not many zombie species here, but there are various powerful and cunning species. And even in winter, they will not hibernate when they are hungry, but lurk in dark corners, quietly waiting for a feast of blood. For example, mutant jackals. They come like a gust of wind, their claws are faster than bullets, and when they leave, they often leave only corpses and broken bones. There was a lone migrating team that encountered them. Although everyone had a gun in their hands, no one survived. These swift and strong creatures, even if the regular army encounters them, will be quite a headache. In order to reduce the casualties of the survivors, the commander of the Union District ordered to take out the precious nuclear fusion core and artillery shells, and use armored forces to escort the migrating immigrants. Although they inherited the weapons of the pre-war regime, unfortunately, the lack of resources made it difficult for them to resume industrial production. They could only alleviate the supply pressure of hundreds of thousands of troops through resource recycling and small workshop production models. The situation they faced was worse than the 6th District 3 years ago. After all, NATO's Marines had never set foot in the northwest of the Huangsha District. There was almost no battlefield here, and there were not many resources worth recycling. Every bullet from the heavy machine gun was precious to them. An assault vehicle painted with snow camouflage drove over from the back of the team. When the assault vehicle passed by, the soldiers did not stop, but raised their hands and saluted in the pack military salute, paying the highest respect to their leader. In the back row of the assault vehicle, a man with a stern expression looked at the map without saying a word. His name was Wei Bian. After Jiang Bihei, he served as the commander of the United District, and his status was probably similar to that of the NAC Marshal. Sitting next to him was his assistant, Luo Zhugang, the deputy commander of the United District. This was the last team to go to Hanzhong, and also the last team of survivors to move out of Lanzhou. When they left, the abandoned city was left with only broken walls and wild beasts wandering in the streets. Perhaps hundreds of years later, ivy will grow out of the cracks in the cement road, and new buds will grow on the dead trees. Nature will erase the evidence of human existence in its own way, and dye the earth with its original color, barbaric and disorder. The snow came earlier this year than in previous years. Luo Zhugang, who was sitting in the co-pilot seat, sighed and shook the cigarette, but that was about to burn out into the ashtray. Yes, Wei Bian said lightly. It's really freezing me. Glancing at the commander with his peripheral vision, Luo Zhugang burned the last trace of nicotine on the cigarette butt and put it out in the ashtray. Do you want me to turn up the air conditioner? No, I just feel cold in another sense. Luo Zhugang waved his hand, and with his rough fingers, he took out another cigarette from his pocket and put it in his mouth. You are overdrawing your health. As if he heard something funny, Luo Zhugang suddenly laughed and blew a smoke ring. Fuck your health. Wei Bian did not respond, and his frowning eyes remained on the paper map. The silence lasted for a long time in the carriage, and only the sound of wheels rolling over the snow could be heard. Luo Zhugang squinted his eyes, silently smoking a cigarette made of mutant tobacco, and feeling the spicy taste in his nose. I don't know when it started, only this feeling can make him feel that he is still alive. Luozu Gang broke the silence very abruptly. Time is running out. However, Wen Bian still had that indifferent expression. I know. I heard that a force called NAC has emerged in Wanghei City. The full name seems to be New Pan-Asian Cooperation. I've heard of it. Those little guys seem to be sent by them. Although our missiles can't deal with them, it's still a trouble. Do we really want to go to war with them? Luozu Gang scratched his head. Yeah. The car fell silent again. After a while, it was Luozu Gang who broke the silence again with a cigarette in his mouth. To be honest, I really envy you. When he heard this, Wen Bian's eyes left the map in his hand for the first time and looked through the car window at the white wilderness. There, a sentinel discovered the mutant jackal lurking in the snow and immediately raised his rifle. Soon, blood was all over the white snow, but when he took out his dagger and went forward to dig out the subcrystal, 3 jackals pounced on him from the snow. The gunfire was loud, but soon stopped. The medical soldier carried the dying sentinel onto the truck, but he was soon lying in a body bag after the rescue was ineffective. The bodies of the 3 jackals were carried onto the truck with an organic converter, and the subcrystals were dug out and refined into nutrient mixtures there. The team did not stop from beginning to end, and the people who passed by the bloodstains never took their eyes off the road under their feet for a moment. It was as if nothing had happened. Nature has already decided who will die and who will survive. You won't be envious. Wen Bian put his eyes back on the map and said lightly, "Success. The cells in the test tube are still alive." The cheers of the women rang out in the laboratory. When Jiang Chen heard Lin Ling say this, he didn't know how to describe the excitement in his heart at this moment. According to Lin Ling, before placing the test tube in the freezer, she dripped 20 milliliters of test solution mixed with human tissue cells into the test tube. After placing the test tube in a special freezing device to simulate the dormant environment, the living cells in the test tube successfully survived the entropy reduction link when crossing the gate. The key to solving the problem of bringing organisms through is antimatter. Lin Ling used a lot of mathematical and physical formulas to explain the reason to Jiang Chen. However, Jiang Chen was confused from beginning to end and didn't understand what she was saying at all. Even though he repeatedly asked her to explain the principle in plain language, she just patted the whiteboard with helplessness, threw away the marker in her hand, and looked at Jiang Chen with caring eyes. Give up. At this time, snowflakes fell outside the window. Is it snowing already? Sun Jiao looked out the window. Does it snow at this time in previous years? Jiang Chen, who was diverted from the topic, also looked out the window. Usually in November. Yao whispered. It seems that winter this year is earlier than in previous years. Sun Jiao outside. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 870 Preparation for War. Although only 20 milliliters of cell test solution can be carried now, a breakthrough has been made in the originally unsolvable problem. Jiang Chen believes that, as long as the experiment continues, the problem of carrying living people through time will be solved sooner or later. The key to the problem now is that carrying this 20 milliliters of cell test solution directly consumes 0.01 milligrams of antimatter. And these antimatter are almost all the antimatter stocks collected by Lin Ling some time ago. According to Lin Ling, it is easier to collect antimatter in space, and there will be much less material interference than on Earth. However, it is very difficult to carry out aerospace activities in the end of the world. The space debris in outer space has almost formed a planetary ring belt, orbiting the Earth at a terrifying speed. Building an antimatter collection space station in the present world may be a good choice, but from the technical conditions, it seems quite unrealistic. But no matter what, this is a good start. Perhaps as the research continues, Lin Ling can find a more convenient way to consume less antimatter, and it is also possible to carry living things through the present world and the end of the world. To celebrate this success, Jiang Chen returned to the present world and asked the dessert chef and the cafeteria on the top floor of the future building to personally make a 12-inch luxurious pudding cake and bring it to the end of the world as a reward for Lin Ling. The excited Lin Ling almost jumped on it with her eyes shining. In the evening, a celebration party was held in the villa. Jiang Chen only remembered that he drank a lot of wine, and he didn't remember what happened next very clearly. It snowed. This year's winter came earlier than in previous years. The light snow drifted from yesterday afternoon to the next morning. In just one night, the whole city was covered with a layer of silver. Although the snow was only a thin layer on the ground, people had already smelled the smell of nuclear winter from the air and began to prepare for winter early. The cabbage and potatoes in the farmers market in the 6th district were in short supply. In order to stabilize prices, Jiang Chen had to take on the responsibility of food transporter again and transported 300 tons of rice as well as 150 tons of cabbage and potatoes each to the end of the world to stabilize market demand. The caravan stationed in the 6th block left the market early and headed south. They had to drag the expensive food to the southern area before the heavy snow blocked the road. The NAC patrol team also changed their equipment, wearing winter clothes and driving snowmobiles on the broken streets to patrol the NAC territory. The soldiers had already completed the 10-kilometer running exercise and were now carrying rifles into the training ground and began live fire shooting training under the guidance of the instructors. After emptying a magazine, they went to the cafeteria to eat, rested for half an hour, and then continued training. Everyone in the fishbone base lived a fulfilling life, except for a certain marshal who wants 6, when he is well fed and warm, who did not wake up from the gentle embrace of the sisters until the sun was high in the sky. After giving a light kiss on the foreheads of Sun Jiao and Xiao Ro, Jiang Chen covered the 2 girls with a quilt, put on his clothes, and walked out of the house. He would take a plane to Los Angeles in 2 days. There would definitely be many inconveniences in traveling back to the end of the world in the United States. He planned to see if there was any work that needed to be done by him and finish it all before leaving. When Jiang Chen pushed open the door of the command room, Han Junhe was sitting at the command table looking at the map. Judging from the fact that the coffee in her hand no longer emitted white mist, she should have been standing here for a long time. The last batch of migration teams has set off. If they don't stop on the way, they are estimated to have arrived in Hanzhong now. According to the intelligence detected by the pilots, the combat power of the Northern Union Command Area is between 100,000 and 300,000, equipped with pre-war armor and anti-aircraft vehicles. 100,000 to 300,000? Is the area so large? Jiang Chen said in a sweat. Our planes can't get too close. They used anti-aircraft missiles to lock on and drive away our fighter planes. Han Junhe's finger gently slid across the holographic map and dropped a window in front of Jiang Chen. The red area box above is the no-fly zone designated by the other side with anti-aircraft missiles. The area from Hanzhong to Ankang was covered by the anti-aircraft missile alert range of the United Command Area. I still don't understand why they want to migrate. If it's just for expansion, why abandon the base in Lanzhou? Jiang Chen looked at the mark on the map that was drawn on Hanzhong City, and a puzzled expression appeared on his face. According to the merchants from the United District, it seems that the government there is controlled by a military organization called the Military Police Corps, which implements a military political management model similar to the NAC. Not only that, after 20 years of development, the local survivors have reclaimed a large amount of farmland and settlements, and planted mutant fruits, shell grains, and a genetically modified plant that is similar to potatoes but tastes bad. In this way, they should not have a serious survival crisis. But why are they so obsessed with migrating south? Only they themselves know the specific reasons. Merchants from the United District have few opportunities to contact the survivors, and all trade is done directly with the Military Police Corps. They extremely distrust outsiders, and we can't communicate with them at all. Han Junhe shook his head. If a war breaks out, who do you think has a better chance of winning? Jiang Chen said after a moment of silence. They have a large number of pack pre-war land combat equipment, but we have a greater advantage in resources. Han Junhe's beautiful face wrinkled slightly when he said this. He pinched his chin and thought for a moment before answering. Maybe the battle will be tragic, but we are unlikely to lose. Even if 5 Jagdtiger seconds were exchanged for 1 Prowler, the balance of victory would still tilt towards NAC. As long as the Type 50 electromagnetic cannon could penetrate their armor, Jiang Chen had no reason to lose. However, there was one thing Han Jianhua did not consider. NAC was not just superior in resources, but it had the resources of a world behind it. The assembly plant for mechanical exoskeletons had been built on the Anger Island in the present world. In a few months, Jiang Chen would be able to produce thousands of exoskeletons to equip every NAC soldier. You know, even now, the monthly output of K1 exoskeletons in the 6th block does not exceed 500 units. After consulting Han Jianhua, Jiang Chen revised the conscription law. From next month to next March, 2,000 people will be recruited from the NAC area every month to go to the Fishbone base for training. At the same time, the 3 major corps were upgraded to 3 major divisions, with brigade-level combat units under them, and each brigade has 2,000 people. The number of brigades under each division will be adjusted according to needs, with no upper limit. With the current strength, each division can only be assigned 4 brigades. No matter how you look at it, the combat power of NAC is still slightly different from that of the United District. But the victory or defeat of a war has never been based on the number of people. If it is compared with industrial capacity and logistics, 10 United Districts are not the opponent of NAC. Chapter 871 I live here too. Although the end of the world Wanhei has entered winter, the present Koro Island is still warm. The setting sun is slightly slanting, and the sea breeze gently touches the leaf buds of the palm trees, ruffling the hair of the tourists washing in the sea. With the surging sound of the sea tide, bursts of playfulness and laughter came from not far away. Although he didn't understand which country the language belonged to, Jiang Chen always felt that it sounded very comfortable. The runway of Los Angeles International Airport has been applied for, and he will take a plane to the United States tomorrow. He returned here from the end of the world this morning, and stayed at home all day to make final preparations for this trip. After dinner, thinking of changing his mood, he changed into sportswear and went out. Originally, Jiang Chen just planned to run a few laps around the park in the villa area, but with his physique, he didn't feel anything for a distance of 1 or 2 kilometers. It happened that he got interested halfway, so he ran a little farther than before, running along the road to the beach. On the island of Koro alone, there are as many as 500,000 to 600,000 tourists staying here. Looking at those people enjoying life on the beach, Jiang Chen always felt satisfied as a king. Shaking his head and smiling to get rid of this weird thought, Jiang Chen wiped the sweat off his face with the towel on his shoulder. He was wondering if he should go back when he happened to see an acquaintance on the road. It was Xiaoyu. She was wearing a white sportswear and had her hair tied into a neat ponytail. With the rhythm of running, it swayed like a squirrel's tail. Seeing Jiang Chen, she waved and jogged over. It's rare. Do you also have the habit of running in the evening? Jiang Chen said. Usually I run in the morning, unless I sleep too much in the morning. Do you want to join me? Yes. Xiaoyu nodded and ran beside Jiang Chen naturally. In fact, Jiang Chen had originally planned to go back, but he ended up running with Xiaoyu again. But what he didn't know was that when he met her, she had almost finished running, but when he invited her, she nodded for some reason. This run lasted for an hour. What puzzled Xiaoyu was that from the outside, Jiang Chen was not the kind of person who was good at sports, but after running for an hour, he didn't sweat much. Finally, she couldn't hold on any longer and asked to take a break. It happened that the place where they stopped was near Jiang Chen's villa. Xiaoyu borrowed the lower bathroom, took off her sportswear, and took a shower. Aisha walked into the bathroom with clean clothes and washed the sweaty clothes. When she passed by Jiang Chen, she gave him a thumbs up for no apparent reason. After drying her wet long hair, Xiaoyu, wearing pajamas, pushed open the frosted glass door and walked out, saying a little embarrassedly, "Do you have any casual clothes? Can you lend me one? I can't wear this dress out." Aisha said, "It's almost 9 o'clock. Let's stay here tonight." Jiang Chen looked at Aisha's back helplessly. This little girl occasionally took the initiative to do some unnecessary things. Hearing Aisha's invitation, Xiaoyu's cheeks flushed slightly, and she was about to refuse. But at this moment, Natasha just pushed the door open and walked in. After walking up the stairs, they met eyes. Seeing the unexpected person, Xiaoyu was slightly stunned. "Why are you here?" "Because I couldn't rent a house, and there happened to be an empty room here, so I stayed here." Natasha smiled mischievously and teased Xia Xiaoyu. What? Are you jealous? The blush climbed down from her cheeks to her neck, but Xia Xiaoyu's stubborn expression clearly showed that she was not going to admit it. Natasha didn't wait for her to answer, humming a Russian ditty and walking towards the bathroom. She had just returned from the embassy, so she planned to take a shower in the bathroom and change into loose pajamas to rest. Silence lasted for a long time at the stairs. Just when Jiang Chen wanted to ask if he needed her to drive her back to the apartment, Xia Xiaoyu turned her stiff neck away and looked at him. So, from now on, I'll live here too. When Xia Xiaoyu squeezed out these words with all her strength, Jiang Chen was completely stunned. What on earth is going on here? The flight time from Coral Island to Los Angeles is 13 hours, and the time difference is 16 hours. At 6 o'clock in Los Angeles time, a white Gulfstream private plane slowly landed on the runway of Los Angeles International Airport. 6 black cars were parked beside the runway, and officials and bodyguards in suits had been waiting there, quietly waiting for the plane to land. Accompanied by Xia Xiaoyu, Jiang Chen got off the plane. Following behind him was a ghost agent named ZHUU, and 6 Xinghuan trade bodyguards in suits. Although Aisha strongly requested to accompany him, considering her identity as the chief instructor of the ghost agents and the fact that she would have to press the button to launch the missile if something unexpected happened to Jiang Chen, it would be better for her to stay behind. After seeing Jiang Chen, Lawrence, who had been waiting for a long time, took off his sunglasses and reached out his hand to greet him from a distance. Hello, Mr. Jiang Chen. You should have seen me, but I guess you have forgotten me, a nobody. So let me introduce myself. We meet again, Mr. Lawrence. Jiang Chen said with a smile, shaking Lawrence's hand. Lawrence was stunned. He obviously didn't expect Jiang Chen to remember him. Your memory is amazing. I'm also surprised that the FBI is responsible for my security. Jiang Chen glanced at the 2 bodyguards wearing sunglasses behind him and said teasingly, yes, your security level is second only to a fat man 60 years ago. By the way, his name is Khrushchev. Ahem. Please allow me to introduce, this is Mr. Pritzker, the Minister of Commerce. You may have had a lawsuit, but I hope you don't mind. Lawrence skillfully introduced the official next to him to Jiang Chen. The so-called lawsuit naturally refers to the antitrust investigation that shocked the United States and the interruption of the Phantom Helmet service. Nice to meet you, Mr. Jiang Chen. Pritzker extended his hand. His hooked nose looked a bit aggressive, but his voice was quite gentle. Nice to meet you, Mr. Pritzker. Jiang Chen smiled and shook his hand. As Jiang Chen expected, the United States took his safety very seriously. No matter how much the Pentagon and the White House were troubled by the dozens of intercontinental missiles in his hands, they could not do anything to him here, nor would they allow anyone to do anything to him here. Once something unexpected happened to this big guy, those missiles would probably not stay at the bottom of the sea, but would fall on the heads of Americans. By then, all of North America would have to return to the Stone Age. Chapter 872 Arrival in Los Angeles. Jiang Chen followed Lawrence and others through a special channel to leave the airport. It can be seen that the United States really took his safety to heart, and there was no news about his visit to Los Angeles. Otherwise, apart from anything else, the airport gate would definitely be blocked by a large group of high-tech enthusiasts and reporters. The Phantom Helmet has been integrated into the lives of Americans, and this influence has long surpassed Google, Microsoft, and Apple. Although the White House is very troubled by young people's dependence on the products of the future group, some things cannot be solved by headaches. Especially in a country where the president is elected by voting. No matter how much money the consortium spends on publicity, the final decision of the election is still the votes. For various reasons, Jiang Chen did not sit in the same car with Mr. Pritzker, but sat next to Lawrence. From what he said, the former FBI agent seemed to be doing well, and had climbed to the position of Special Agent in Charge, SAC. Although the situation of the two people's first meeting was not friendly, they unexpectedly chatted freely. Lawrence repeatedly stressed several safety issues to Jiang Chen, such as not to leave the car too far when going out, and not to panic in case of emergency, because there is a whole row of SEALs outside to ensure his safety. Unless it is absolutely necessary, don't let that agent girl draw her gun. How is my old friend Roberts doing? He has changed from an arms dealer to a big director, but the nature of a bastard will not change. Jiang Chen smiled and said nothing. But to be honest, compared to those politicians who are good at take-eye, he still prefers to get along with such simple people. Although the words are a bit vulgar, at least they are not annoying. When the convoy drove to a bridge, it encountered a traffic jam. There seemed to be people marching in front, holding green signs, and shouting slogans like birds. Jiang Chen only vaguely heard that a guy used a loudspeaker and shouted English with a strong Kamen flavor. We refuse the assigned work. We are not here to work. We are here as guests. The zoo needs more grapevines and camels, not pandas or alpacas. Supermarkets are not allowed to sell pork, not beef either. It seems that there are also Indians wearing turbans mixed in, but no one pays attention. What kind of idiot can manage this city? Protest the mayor of Los Angeles. The mayor of Los Angeles must resign. Perhaps because they are used to this kind of situation, the passers-by calmly watch them holding signs and shouting slogans. In addition to the media reporters who want to make big news, there are only a few people with travel bags on their backs, holding up their mobile phones to take pictures with great interest. Who are they? Jiang Chen asked teasingly. The guests invited by the old woman who has not adjusted her period for a month, and there are also a few who follow the trend to make trouble. Don't pay attention to them. Let's change lanes. Lawrence cursed, closed the car window, and turned the steering wheel. According to traffic rules, this kind of temporary lane change is not allowed, but the FBI car is a little different from the ordinary American car. Privileges exist in any country, especially for special officials. By the way, what does the mayor of Los Angeles have to do with supermarkets? Jiang Chen laughed gloatingly. There are not so many troubles in New China. Since the police drones were popularized from Penglai City to Koro Island and other places, almost all the villains have lost their jobs. Even those transnational criminal gangs have died down a lot. As for those who march and make trouble, all of them will be deported and go back to where they came from. It doesn't matter, but some people live like dogs. They don't contribute to this collective, steal your things, crawl on you like maggots, and still look like they are a vulnerable group. If there is a piece of meat missing in the lunchbox, they shamelessly put on the attitude of the master and yell that you must change. If they are not satisfied with anything, they put on the face of a gangster and use their shallow IQ and vulgar language to show how shameless they are. They don't know what is ugly. Lawrence cursed and slammed the horn and stopped at the red light. Is it really okay for you to say these things? Jiang Chen glanced at him. I'm not Hillary. I don't care about those votes. Lawrence snorted. I really don't understand why I didn't vote for Trump. After a long time, Lawrence seemed to feel that he had said too much and added in a soothing tone. Okay, I admit that not all refugees are like this. At least, some people still know that it's wrong for them to do this. There are many such people everywhere. Just get used to it. Jiang Chen comforted. However, as soon as this sentence came out, a boom sounded not far away. Screams and screams spread. The burglar alarm rang loudly, and chaos filled the entire street. But this FBI detective seemed quite calm. It seemed that he had gotten used to it. Lawrence stepped on the brakes, buried his face between his fingers, took a tired breath, and took the walkie-talkie hanging next to him. Carl, Jace, go over there and check the situation. At least get the situation under control, and then hand it over to the Los Angeles police. Understood. After hanging up the call, Lawrence drove on. Jiang Chen asked, what happened over there? Lawrence curled his lips and replied, did someone hide a bomb in their clothes? Or maybe in the car, who knows? Anyway, I only know that where there are refugees, there are terrorist attacks. When we doubt whether it will happen, it will definitely happen. This is Murphy's theorem. The convoy soon arrived at the New Zealand embassy. The New Zealand ambassador had been waiting for a long time and warmly welcomed Jiang Chen and Mr. Pritzker, the Secretary of Commerce from Washington. Here, Jiang Chen also saw the mayor of Los Angeles, the governor of California, and a group of city government officials. Although the welcoming ceremony was not grand, the level of the officials who came to greet him was definitely a national level treatment. After dealing with a group of enthusiastic officials, Jiang Chen was led by Sun Jiao, the New Zealand ambassador to Los Angeles, to his residence. In the embassy, Jiang Chen's security work was handled by the security guards of Starring Trade, and outside the embassy, it was handled by the FBI. Actually, the United States recommended him to stay at the Hilton Hotel or something like that at first, but when he thought about the FBI watching him while he slept, Jiang Chen felt uncomfortable, so he declined the offer and chose a Singapore embassy. Before Jiang Chen entered the room where he was staying, ZHUU remembered Aisha's instructions and walked into the room with anti-detection equipment, doing a comprehensive inspection to ensure that there were no eavesdropping devices or pinhole cameras inside. After throwing his suit on the hanger, Jiang Chen lay on the big bed to rest for a while, then got up and went out and found Xiao who was packing her luggage in the room. Seeing her busy, Jiang Chen couldn't help but smile. Why don't you let the embassy staff help you pack these things? I'm used to packing my own luggage by myself. By the way, there's a party tonight. Don't you want to rest first? After all, you just took a 13-hour flight. Xiao gently tucked her hair behind her ears, folded her formal suit, and put it in the closet. Aren't you going to attend? Jiang Chen asked with some regret. I won't participate. I'm not good at that kind of occasion. And I still have some preparations to do for the Silicon Valley High-Tech Conference. Xiao pushed her glasses and said, thank you for your hard work. No. A faint smile appeared on the corner of Xiao's mouth. I don't know if it's an illusion, but Jiang Chen always feels that Xiao is more cheerful than before, and her cold attitude has softened a lot. Is it because of that night? Thinking of this, Jiang Chen felt his face getting hot, and he coughed quickly to get rid of the bad thoughts from his mind. However, there was one thing that Jiang Chen was a little puzzled. In the car that night, the two of them had clearly reached that step, but afterwards Xiao acted as if nothing had happened, as if she had completely forgotten about it and never mentioned it. Is it really because of being drunk? Chapter 873 Governor's Party. In the evening, California Governor Jerry Brown hosted a banquet for Jiang Chen at the governor's mansion. Also invited were Richard Fox, vice president of Warner Brothers, and celebrities from all walks of life in Los Angeles. For this world's richest man who topped the Forbes wealth list and was as rich as a country, Jiang Chen naturally became the center of attention at the banquet. The eyes cast at him were either envious, peeping, jealous, or friendly. Many entrepreneurs who wanted to climb the big tree of future group were trying their best to get in front of him, to get familiar with him, and to get close to him. Jiang Chen never thought that he would set foot in the United States in such a manner, but when this day came, he was not too surprised. Welcome to the United States, Mr. Jiang Chen. This is a paradise for rich people. You will like it here. Mr. Fox smiled and raised his champagne and gently clinked glasses with Jiang Chen. As one of the shareholders, Mr. Fox was looking forward to Iron Curtain of Time, which was jointly filmed by Warner Brothers and Virtual Animation, the only large-scale VR modeling company in the world. Now the filming has entered the final stage, and it will be on the screen in January next year at the latest. For this powerful collaboration of next-generation film and television works, major film review websites have given quite optimistic predictions. After all, it is the world's first movie shot based on VR technology. Even for this novelty, there is no reason why the box office will be low. If you mean Mr. Brown's banquet. Jiang Chen smiled and drank the champagne in the glass. At this time, the governor and a middle-aged man in a suit walked over here. Brown, who had a shaved head, smiled and asked Jiang Chen, "How is it? Are you satisfied with the drinks?" "Very satisfied. Thank you for your hospitality." Jiang Chen replied politely. "Haha, thank you for your compliment. Please allow me to introduce you. This is Andy Giannini, the sponsor of this banquet." Brown smiled and introduced the middle-aged man standing next to Jiang Chen, chairman of Bank of America and major shareholder of Security Pacific. "It's too boring to write my business on my business card. I prefer people to call me a golf player." Andy grinned, showing a mouthful of eyes, and stretched out his hand to Jiang Chen. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Jiang Chen." Jiang Chen noticed that when meeting this person, Mr. Fox, a shareholder of Warner Brothers, seemed quite reserved. Nice to meet you, Mr. Jianini. Jiang Chen shook his outstretched hand. To be honest, this last name is really a bit difficult to pronounce. The first time he read it, he almost bit his tongue. However, Jiang Chen was not unfamiliar with the last name Jianini. After all, it represents the future group. Before coming to the United States, he did enough homework. Bank of America can be said to be the financial core of the California Consortium. Its predecessor was AP, the Italian bank founded by Ciannini in the early 20th century. The man standing in front of him is one of the real power holders in the United States. In this country dominated by Wall Street, capitalists are the core of power. Although the status of the California Consortium is slightly inferior to that of the Eastern Consortium, the wealth accumulated over the past century cannot be underestimated. Many people know that Los Angeles, California, is rich in American blockbusters, but few people know that California is also the largest arms production base in the United States, including the famous Lockheed Aircraft Company and Northrop Grumman. The first and second largest arms companies in the United States are all from this family. Although the shares have also been diluted a lot by the Eastern Consortium, its position as the military industry hegemon is still unshakable. It is definitely not possible to hold such a banquet from the state government's treasury. Let's not talk about anything else, just look at the champagne on the table. Judging from the brand, they are all famous wines produced in Italian wineries. The cost of the wine alone is more than hundreds of thousands of dollars. If the reporters knew that the governor used taxpayers' money to hold a party, I'm afraid the media would have a collective climax the next day. However, the fact that the money was paid by the Ciannini family also indirectly shows that the governor has a close relationship with the California Consortium. It can even be said that this party itself was held at the behest of this big shot. The topic between the two was very relaxed, and they hardly talked about business. Mr. Ciannini seemed to be quite interested in golf. When Jiang Chen mentioned that he owned a golf course at the foot of Mount Fuji, his eyes suddenly lit up, and he said with a smile, "Mr. Jiang is really bold to buy at the bottom when the biochemical crisis broke out in Tokyo. If I have the opportunity to go to Tokyo, I must go to your golf course to take a look." That being said, Jiang Chen did not believe that he was the only one who divided up Japan's assets at that time. The consortiums on the west coast of the United States have always been interested in East Asian affairs and would not miss such a good opportunity. Although there is an element of gambling in it, what is $1 billion or $2 billion for such a consortium? Haha, please honor me. Jiang Chen smiled and said politely. The pleasantries lasted about 10 minutes, and the governor and Mr. Fox left one after another, holding champagne and joining other circles. Mr. Ciannini finally turned the topic to business. I heard Mr. Jiang had some friction with the Freemasons. I wonder if it's true or not. After asking this question, Ciannini seemed to feel that it wasn't appropriate to ask directly, so he added, "Of course, I don't mean to offend. Our ancestors came from Italy. Although the Ciannini family is no longer in the WASP faction, we also have reservations about the Jews. Of course there is friction, and it's not small. If Mr. Ciannini reads the news, he will definitely know about it." Jiang Chen smiled. Ciannini smiled and said nothing. Of course he read the news. It's impossible for him not to know about this kind of thing that everyone knows. It's just that listening to the person involved in person speak out has a completely different meaning than hearsay. Because most of the industries are distributed on the West Coast, the Ciannini family is far away from Washington, the economic and political center of the United States. In the eyes of the East Coast Consortium, they are more like local rich people in the countryside than a well-matched opponent. This is also the reason why the California Consortium is declining, and now it is almost at the bottom of the top 10 consortiums in the United States. If it weren't for the behemoth Bank of America, the Texas Consortium, that emerged after World War II would even be on par with them. This sense of alienation from the mainstream world makes the Ciannini family quite restless. This is also the reason why they are keen to invest in Asia. If they can't go east, they must at least find a way out in the west. The friction between the future group and the Freemasons gave them an opportunity. If the Freemasons fall, the Masonic Consortium headed by Goldman Sachs will inevitably face liquidation, and the two-way split in Wall Street will be completely broken. This will undoubtedly be a rare opportunity for the West Coast Consortium far away from the power center. Of course, all this is based on the premise that the future group will eventually win. Andy Chianini is sure that he has not made a mistake with his vision. He thinks it is worth betting on this young man. Chapter 874 Unexpected Trouble. However, just as Chianini was about to discuss some business matters with Jiang Chen, the banquet was suddenly interrupted by the rude sound of a door being pushed open. The melodious music in the hall gradually stopped, and two white men in suits walked in with obviously unfriendly faces. The originally lively party suddenly became quiet. Seeing the people coming in, Governor Brown frowned slightly and walked towards the two men in suits. Jiang Chen noticed that behind the two men, Lawrence from the FBI also trotted up, with a look of displeasure on his face. Although he was unhappy, Brown still tried to use a gentle tone to ask, "What's wrong, Mr. Steven? This is my party, and those invited are all law-abiding citizens. Or is it that the terrorist attack that happened in the parade in front of the bridge this morning has given you a headache and you want to come to my place for a drink? Law-abiding? Really?" The man called Steven snorted with a cold face and scanned the hall of the governor's mansion with an eagle-like gaze, locked on Jiang Chen, and his eyes gradually narrowed. "Are you Jiang Chen? The organization of the intelligence department is somewhat special. Departments such as the CIA and the FBI directly serve the National Security Council of the United States. The chairman of the National Security Council of the United States is the president, so the CIA can be said to be an organization with a strong central color, and it is completely different from the state government. It is precisely because of this that Steven can completely ignore the governor." "Yes, what's the matter?" Jiang Chen said with a pleasant face, and put the glass aside. "Our agents have found something interesting in Ukraine. You know, the Russians have been doing some tricks there recently, or to put it bluntly, illegal intrusions. According to the reaction of Ukrainian government soldiers, Russian soldiers disguised as Ukrainian civilian armed forces used a weapon that can paralyze electronic equipment." "Sorry, I don't understand what you are talking about," Jiang Chen said with a smile. He noticed that Zhuu, who was wearing a brown suit, was already standing at the door with her hands in her pockets. She certainly didn't pull out a gun, but if Mr. Steven made any rude moves, the ghost agent had 100 ways to make him lie on the ground. "Really? I think your company is an expert in imp weapons and should know what this means." Steven sneered. The guests at the banquet all looked at this side with interest. Jiang Chen sighed and spread his hands helplessly. It's too arbitrary to conclude that the weapon was made by the future group based on the EMP feature alone. What about the M4 rifles in the hands of the Ukrainian civilians and government forces? Or are those people actually American special forces? Steven's tone was a bit threatening. "I hope you can cooperate. I'm not kidding you. So, what are you going to do to make me, who is not an American, cooperate?" Jiang Chen shrugged and smiled nonchalantly. At this point, the tension between the two had reached its peak. Brown waited for Steven angrily. He didn't care whether there was an imp in a Ukrainian town tens of thousands of kilometers away. He only cared about how much investment dollars could be obtained for California at this party, and how many jobs could be solved. It is no exaggeration to say that as long as Jiang Chen negotiated a deal with anyone here, it would give him a boost in the next gubernatorial election. Unfortunately, this party was obviously ruined. Just as he was about to speak, Lawrence, who had been standing at the door, spoke first. Facing this colleague from a different department, he rarely used an aggressive tone. "Enough, Mr. Steven. Jiang Chen is a guest of the White House, not your suspect. Everything must be done according to procedures. If there are no procedures, what do we need the White House and the Constitution for?" Steven said word by word. "In the face of national security, there are exceptions to everything. And I'm not interrogating him. I just hope he can cooperate with the investigation." Lawrence stared at him and said without giving in, "But the FBI is responsible for his safety. If you understand the word national security, then go ask your boss. At least get permission before taking action." Lawrence shut Steven's mouth with one sentence. As he guessed, Steven's actions were completely based on private and unauthorized. However, the information about Jiang Chen's security level was strictly confidential even within the FBI. It was understandable that Steven, who didn't know the inside story, would bump into them. After all, he was a specialist assigned to Ukraine affairs. When he learned that Jiang Chen, who might be involved in this matter, would visit Los Angeles, he flew over from Washington as soon as possible. He didn't even ask his superiors. Ahem. Mr. Steven, say hello to Mr. Naomi for me, Jianini said with a light cough. Jiang Chen noticed that Steven's shoulders were obviously stiff. I think Naomi should be his immediate superior. Judging from his expression of not hanging Lawrence, his level is at least special agent in charge, SAC, or above. In this case, the Mr. Naomi mentioned by Jianini should be a person at the level of director or deputy director. It seems that the strength of this California consortium should not be underestimated. In the end, under the pressure of those pairs of eyes, Steven gestured to the assistants around him and chose to retreat temporarily. But before leaving, he left a sentence as if to demonstrate, I will find evidence. Evidence? Jiang Chen almost laughed out loud. What if he had collected the evidence? Would the United States sentence him? This CIA agent must be one of those newcomers who were promoted too quickly, and he was eager to do something to prove his achievements in this position. However, such thoughts are often quite dangerous, especially for people who work in dangerous industries. On the other hand, Lawrence, the old fox, would never do such a rash thing. Not thinking that Mr. Steven could cause any trouble to him, Jiang Chen looked at him with a smile and said, welcome. I'm sorry for this little episode. Brown walked to Jiang Chen with a glass of wine and said in an apologetic tone, it's okay, I can treat it as a funny sideshow. Jiang Chen said with a smile. Friendly laughter came from all around. ZHUU nodded slightly to Jiang Chen and left the hall after Lawrence and closed the door of the governor's mansion. The melodious music sounded and the party continued. However, after such a little episode, everyone's nature was reduced to the lowest. Even though the governor is very sociable, he managed to keep the party going until the end. He had done his best. Because of the sudden visit of the CIA, such a carefully planned party was completely ruined. Not only the governor was annoyed, but also Andy Giannini. The CIA not only ruined his mood, but also his business. He had originally planned to discuss cooperation with Jiang Chen, but he swallowed it all back. After such a thing happened, who would still be in the mood to discuss business? But Giannini didn't care. After all, Jiang Chen would stay in Los Angeles for a while, and he would have many opportunities. Chapter 875 Night Talk. In addition to Mr. Giannini, whose last name is difficult to pronounce, Jiang Chen did meet a lot of interesting people at the party. There are entrepreneurs who spare no effort to promote their own companies, entrepreneurs who desperately promote their business ideas, and Hollywood actresses who are simply promoting themselves. Mr. Jiang Chen, it's nice to meet you. This is my business card. I wonder if you are interested in financial products. You know, the richer the person, the less likely they are to let their wealth depreciate. I happen to work in this area. What a joke. I even have my own bank. Why do I need to buy your financial products? I'm the chairman of Condell Materials Co. Limited. This is my business card. I wonder if your company is interested in nanoceramics. We have made amazing technological breakthroughs in the field of nanoceramics, but we have a little difficulty in funding. If you are interested, I'm willing to sell 50% of my shares. Of course I'm interested, but such companies, let alone those in California, can be counted on the Nasdaq with two hands. Apart from hyping up concepts and holding press conferences to cheat investors' money, Jiang Chen really doesn't believe that these high-tech companies can come up with anything. My name is Angelina Jolie. May I have the honor of buying you a drink? The open-collared dress perfectly outlined the graceful figure of this Hollywood sexy goddess, especially her gestures, which were almost nakedly seductive. If Jiang Chen had not been uninterested in women much older than him, he might have really lost control. By the way, Jiang Chen's only impression of the name Angelina Jolie was the female tiger in Kung Fu Panda. But I heard that Jolie is very famous in the Hollywood social circle. I think there must be countless men who silently support her behind this successful woman. Jiang Chen smiled and clinked glasses with her, then turned to socialize with other people. The party soon came to an end, and the guests left one after another and said goodbye to the host of the party, Mr. Brown. After saying goodbye to Brown, Jiang Chen walked out of the governor's mansion. At this time, he noticed that the girl who had just chatted with him was leaving with another old man's hand intimately, and got into a classic black car at the door. Seeing this, he couldn't help but shook his head and smiled. Hollywood is a paradise for the rich. This is absolutely true. Which one do you like? At some point, Andy Jianini walked to his side with a smile. Haha, I don't like any of them. Jiang Chen said with a smile. What a waste. I bet that, if you like any of them, just beckon them, and they will send themselves to you. Jianini frowned and said teasingly. This was a bit exaggerated, but it sounded very comfortable. Jiang Chen smiled, and didn't continue on this topic. Somewhat abruptly, Jianini suddenly changed to a serious tone. The Russian issue is quite sensitive in American politics. If you plan to use the power of the WASP consortium to defeat the Freemasons, it's best to pay attention to controlling the distance between you and Russia. Wall Street rarely unites, unless the country faces a common crisis. Jianini's words can also be regarded as a harmless advice. But even without his reminder, Jiang Chen could feel the WASP consortium's attitude wavering. They did not intervene in European affairs at all, and had no intention of cooperating with the future group to put pressure on the Freemasons in the United States. They just took a defensive posture and protected the industry of the future group from the political power controlled by the Freemasons. Speaking of which, it seems to be the same during World War II. Even though the contradictions between the WASPs headed by Morgan and the Jewish consortium such as Goldman Sachs and Lehman Brothers reached an irreconcilable level when the Jews used the concentration camps to win the sympathy of the mainstream media in the United States and pushed Roosevelt, who dismembered Rockefeller, to the position of president. The WASP consortium, which was suspected of providing funds for Hitler, also stopped those actions that went against the historical trend. Thank you for your advice. I will seriously consider it. Jiang Chen smiled. As for the result of the consideration, it depends on the situation. After saying goodbye to Jianini, Jiang Chen walked straight to Lawrence, who was waiting at the door. Give me some time. After saying that, Jiang Chen gestured to ZHUU and took her to stand a little further away. Is the car ready? Jiang Chen was not asking about the car going back to the embassy. After all, the FBI was responsible for the trip back. This trip to the United States was not only to attend the Silicon Valley High-Tech Conference, but also to visit the mysterious Area 51. Since it was Hawking's suggestion, there must be something interesting there. It's ready. It's in the garage 2 streets across from the Singapore embassy. The coordinates have been sent to your map. Compared to Asia, this little girl almost had the word cautious written on her face. Although Jiang Chen wanted to tell her to relax and not be so nervous, he thought that maybe this was her work habit, so he didn't say anything. Thank you for your hard work. Jiang Chen smiled and nodded. The CIA seems to have set its sights on you. How about we go? ZHUU asked hesitantly. This is indeed a problem, but it's not so much of a problem that we need to adjust our plans. After communicating with his men, Jiang Chen turned and walked towards the FBI car. Although becoming famous has many benefits, it also brings less fun. With his current status, he is afraid that he will not have the chance to visit the night view of the west coast of the United States. However, based on the idea that it is a rare opportunity, Jiang Chen asked Lawrence to take a detour and pass through several busy streets on the coast of Los Angeles so that they could quickly appreciate the night view of Los Angeles. After returning to the embassy, Jiang Chen took a shower and did not go to bed immediately. Instead, he turned on his watch and browsed the web. In the next few days, he will take time to go to Nevada next door. Because it is an arrangement outside the schedule and the US side cannot be informed, he obviously cannot take a plane. This means that he needs to spend 5 or 6 hours driving across the desert between California and Nevada. If you don't study the map in advance, you will definitely suffer. After studying the map for a while, Jiang Chen yawned after getting a general idea of the driving route. Seeing that it was getting late, he was about to turn off the lights and go to bed when there was a knock on the door. After turning off the holographic map, Jiang Chen looked at the door and said, "Come in." The door opened, and Jiang Chen sat up from the bed as he watched Xia Xiai walk in. "It's so late, what's the matter?" A little something. Sun Jiao shook the document in her hand. What I have in my hand is the corporate information provided to us by the organizer of the High-Tech Innovation Conference. There are several companies with good investment potential. I think we can consider holding or directly buying them. In addition, regarding tomorrow's schedule, are you ready to go to bed? End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.